I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Anchorage Assembly and begin with a roll call. Madam Clerk?
Harriet Drummond. Here. Dick Traney. Absent. Paul Honeman. Here. Elvie Gray Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Ernie Hall.
Here.
Bill Starr.
Here.
Adam Trombley. Here. Jennifer Johnston. Here. Patrick Flynn. Present. Chris Birch.
Here.
Debbie Osander.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Mr. Starr, would you mind leading us in a pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have the minutes of the regular meeting of May 24th.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Is there any objection? Hearing and seeing none, the minutes of May 24th are unanimously accepted. The next item is our mayor's report. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Several things. First, I had the pleasure of hanging out in the Breakaway Republic of Eagle River over the weekend. The Bear Paw Festival, as usual, was just tremendous. Probably the best parade in the state, and I think all of Eagle River and Chugiak find their way over there over the course of several days, and a great time was had by all, and appreciate, as always, being invited into the reviewing stand. So thanks to yourself. I know you were active, and of course, Susie Gorski in the chamber and all the volunteers. A great event. Secondly, as you know, on June 28th, I vetoed an amendment passed by the Assembly. The veto deleted the amendment to page 19, line 9, and the phrase after of 18 hours, which added the following: while in Alaska, or 4 days for a maximum of 24 hours if travel out of state is required. After further consultation with Employee Relations and the Municipal Attorney's Office, I've determined that the veto is not necessary to carry out the intent of the administration's original proposal to grant bereavement leave to part-time employees on a prorated basis. So I hereby withdraw the veto, and I'll deliver that in writing to you.
Thank you. Do you have anything else, sir?
Yes, finally, on July 5th, I think as you're probably all aware by now, the municipality of Anchorage filed an appeal to the record of decision, the ROD, granted to the Kindergarten Bridge and Toll Authority. As you know, I'm a strong supporter of the bridge, and I know this decision raised questions which I think we can explain. The right-of-way for the access road to the bridge runs along a narrow corridor behind the Port of Anchorage. At a point behind our newly constructed dry barge dock, it appears that the road could potentially interfere with the operation of the dock and possibly render it non-functional. Given the amount of money invested in the port project and the importance of this facility to both commerce and military needs, it is absolutely essential that this potential conflict be resolved. It had been my hope that this conflict could be resolved prior to the July 5th deadline to file an appeal for the record of decision, but that did not happen. We've since met with Cabada. We've reiterated our concerns. We jointly agreed to use our best efforts and engineering talents to resolve the issue. However, it was important to retain our legal rights until such a solution is agreed to by all parties. So I remain a strong supporter of the bridge. I'm pretty confident we can work through these challenges, but just want everybody to know what the reasoning was behind the appeal. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to let you know how much I appreciate that veto being withdrawn. I spent a fair amount of time this last week researching veto powers and options. It seems to me that we have to get better clarity on this issue, on the extent of the veto. And as such, I have asked our Assembly Attorney, Julia Tucker, to do further research and further communication with the municipal attorney in hopes that we can come up with some kind of lines of understanding of what the parameters are for the veto power, so that we don't run into this wall when we have a time-sensitive, controversial issue, but we can hopefully resolve it in the future before that happens. So there will be an ongoing work on this, and you've already seen in the last 24 hours several emails from Ms. Tucker clarifying her concerns and position, and I know we're going to hear more from Mr. Wheeler, and both of them jointly as this progresses. So I wanted to announce that. Also wanted to announce that we have set an additional work session on the 22nd from 11 to 12, and it's about a long-range financial picture for the port. I'd also like to note that Mr. Trainey has joined us. Welcome, sir. Regarding our agenda tonight, I'm going to ask a couple of things. First, I want to announce that for 9E3, which is the item that deals with the monthly investment report, we didn't receive the full investment report in our packet. We got the last 16 pages by email later. So if someone wants time to review those 16 pages, they haven't had a chance to read them, then I'd recommend they pull that item. Otherwise, we'll just continue on. I also, after conferring with Ms. Tucker, believe that the correct course of action here to deal with the rum runners issue is to pull 9B4, the protest, and deal with it after we deal with 14B, the conditional use permit. I believe that's all of the announcements I have. So, Ms. Drummond, do you have any report for us?
No, thank you.
Mr. Trainey, anything? Mr. Honeman?
Just a reminder that we're postponing the public safety, or canceling the public safety committee meeting that was scheduled for tomorrow at noon, and we'll pick it up at second Wednesday in August.
Thank you. Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ad Hoc Audit Committee dealing with the Police and Fire Retiree Medical Trust audit findings, we met last Friday, and there were quite a few in attendance besides the committee, and I think there are about 6 board members there from the Police and Fire Retirement. And basically the goal of this ad hoc committee is to to work together to find efficiencies in the management of the trust. And some of the options that we discussed include examining recommendations from the administration and also the trust board. And to be a little more specific, some of the options are whether or not to have or request that the municipality provide funding to the trust for the salary of and benefits for one full-time position, whether or not combining the administrative functions with the police and fire retiree trust. And then another option for consideration is contracting out the entire function. And at the next meeting, our discussion is going to be contracting out the entire function and then combining the administrative functions in regard to and also locate a funding mechanism to explore this option, because it was realized that we would need some funds to actually dig deep into combining the administrative functions of these two trusts. And the next meeting will be held probably sometime next month after the board meets. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hall?
Nothing.
Mr. Starr?
Yeah, just to note that the Budget and Finance Committee meeting scheduled for the 21st has been canceled.
Thank you. Mr. Trombley, do you have anything?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Ms. Johnston?
Yes, we'll have a meeting of the Enterprise Committee on July 19th at 11:30. We'll be discussing how we'll be approaching the budgets of the enterprise groups, and it will be a meeting with our CFO. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
Nothing, ma'am.
Mr. Birch?
No report.
All right. With that, a motion to incorporate both the addendum and the laid on the table would...
Second.
Thank you. With that, I will read the addendum and the laid on the table. For the consent agenda, 9D11, there's an AM 400, which is a sole source professional service contract with Alta Geosciences Incorporated for Parks and Rec Department to $235,000. Under information reports, 9E1, there is a revised AIM 63A, which is an amended internal audit report on the annual municipal procurement card review, purchasing department. Under new public hearings, item 14G 2 and 3, there is an AR 184S version, which is a resolution of the municipality appropriating when tendered State of Alaska grants in Senate Bill 46, and an accompanying memorandum 385A. Under laid on the table items, under 9B4, A and B, there is a substitute version for Resolution 188S. This is a resolution of the Municipal Assembly stating its protest regarding a new beverage dispensary duplicate liquor license number 5083 for Basilio Gallo DBA Rum Runners Old Town Bar and Grill, located at 411 E Street, and authorizing the municipal clerk to take certain action. This is accompanied by Assembly Memorandum AIM 71. Under New Business 10A, there's an informational memorandum AIM 70, which is a report of the Bidding Review Board's review of process regarding the request for proposal 2010 PO 33 to provide the enterprise resource planning software and implementation for the municipality of Anchorage. And this is the IT department, the purchasing department. Under items for introduction, there is a new F5, This is ordinance A080, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code Title 8 to add new offenses for sitting or lying down on sidewalks in the downtown improvement district and for pedestrian interference. This would be amending Section 8.75.170 regarding prohibited panhandling and amending the fine schedule of Section 14.60.030 accordingly. This is from the Department of Law, and public hearing is set for our next meeting on the 26th. And this is accompanied by Assembly Memorandum AIM 42. Is there objection to incorporation of these items? Seeing none, Mr. Trombley, are you all right with that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, those items are incorporated, and the amended consent agenda is before us. Motion? I need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Trying to press.
Thank you. And
Second.
all right, that was moved by Mr. Hall, seconded by Ms. Johnston. The amended consent agenda is before us. With that, I will start, I guess, Mr. Birch, with you to see if there's anything you would like to discuss.
No item.
Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you referenced earlier, I would like to pull item 9 Bravo 4 from the regular agenda and items 9 Bravo 4A and B from the laid on the table agenda to delay their consideration following item 14B. And that's all.
I'm sorry, you said 9 Bravo 4, no, I'm including the laid on the table items. All right, I got it. Got it, thank you. Ms. Johnson?
No, thank you.
Mr. Trombley?
No, thanks.
Mr. Starr?
No items.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, I have 9 Bravo 7, 9D10, 9E1, 9F1, 2, and 3.
Very good. Ms. Gray-Jackson?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Honeman?
Yes, I'd like to pull item 9F5, I think that was on laid on the table or addendum.
9F5.
9F5, and one other, catch up to it here, was an appointment for conflict. And that was, I had it pulled, marked, there we go, 9 Delta 5 for potential conflict.
And 9 Delta 5. All right. Mr. Trainee, sir.
No, I think everything was gone already.
All right.
Next bullet, the agenda for this good job.
All right. Ms. Drummond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. 9 Delta 1.
9 Delta 1. All right. Administration? Anything? No? All right. I'll recap to make sure we've got them. 9 Bravo 4 with all its versions. 9 Bravo 7. 9 Delta 1. 9 Delta 5. 9 Delta 10. 9 E1. 9 F1. F2. F5. And 3. F3. Right. Okay. With that, F5, I said yes. All right. Is there any objection to approval of, well, let me put it, well, 9. Is there any objection to approval of the consent agenda for the remaining items? Mr. Trombley, are you all right with that?
Yes.
Okay, the remaining consent agenda passes unanimously. All right, the first item for us would be then 9 Bravo 7. Mr. Hall?
I think you missed one, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry.
Bravo.
Just a minute. Mr. Flynn, what did you say?
I had pulled 9 Bravo 4.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just guess I assumed that would happen by just pulling it.
Madam Chair, and that's all of its variations.
I
Right.
understood. Go ahead, Mr. Flynn.
Madam Chair, when I get the opportunity, I'll press the button to move to postpone this item to follow item 14B.
Second.
And I'm understanding that's all of its cousins.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Is there objection to that? Mr. Trombley, do you object? All right. Then the agenda is revised. Thank you very much. Now, my apologies, Mr. Hall. Now it's your turn on this.
Yes, Madam Chair. I'd like to point out to my constituents, I did pass handouts out to everyone as I move through the ones that I pulled. But on 9 Bravo 7, I pulled that because we have an address change that needs to be made on this item, and it's on line 21, and that needs to be changed from 1101 Boniface to 920 Compassion Circle.
You push the screen first.
And move to approve.
Second.
All right. Is there discussion? Is there objection? Mr. Trombley?
No.
No objection, sir? Is that what you meant?
objection.
All right. Then that item, that amendment passes unanimously. We're now back at the main matter. Mr. Vacalis?
Yes, ma'am. On the AR, on line 18, would need to make the same change.
Mr. Hall, do you mind making that motion to do that?
So moved.
Second.
Is there objection to that additional change? Mr. Trombley?
No objection.
All right. That additional amendment then is incorporated in the document. Is there any other discussion on this matter? Seeing no further discussion, I hesitate on using the screen because of Mr. Trombley. Well, I'll do it anyway. Mr. Trombley, how do you vote on the whole matter?
Yes.
Thank you. And who do we need? Could you please, everyone please vote? Thank you. That passes unanimously. We are now at, I believe, 9 Delta 1. Ms. Drummond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Somebody else needs to move to approve, as I don't intend to vote for it.
Second.
All right, do you want to speak to it, Ms. Drummond?
No, other than I intend to vote no. Thank
All
you.
right. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Tromley, how do you vote on 9 Delta 1?
Yes.
And that item passes 6-5. The next item before us is 9 Delta 5. Mr. Honeman, you pulled that?
I'll move to approve.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Yes, thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Honeman, go ahead.
Just should note that I'm a member of and receive retirement pay from the Anchorage Police and Fire Retirement Program. So I believe this would be a conflict.
Mr. Honeman, would the benefit you receive change according to who's appointed to the board or to this board?
It's unknown as to what advice is made for investments and such for a future retirement pension. I believe it would.
So it's your belief that if there is an appointment of Mr. M to this board, it could potentially give a direct benefit to you economically?
I believe since I receive retirement pay, members of the board who make decisions fiduciary manner for this board, I would believe that it could benefit me regardless of, depending on what they do in their decision-making on
Okay. Well, my initial review of this was that it wasn't going to give you a conflict, sir, because no matter who's on the board, you're still going to get the benefit.
That is correct.
But now you're giving me pause when you say that you think there is a direct.
It would be speculative at best, Madam Chair, and I would think that just simply to vote for or against this would be best if I...
So you're requesting that we give you a conflict?
Yes.
All right. At Mr. Honeman's request, I think in light of the comment, it would just be because of a potential perception that there is a benefit here, not because I believe, based on what he said, that there is a direct benefit. I'm going to rule then that you do have a conflict, sir. At your
Madam
request.
Chair, I have a question or two before you rule.
Oh,
if you don't
okay.
mind.
Before I rule, Mr. Starr.
Through the chair, Mr. Honeman, are you friends with Mr. M? I mean, I know you were associate when you worked there, but are you friends with him?
I am. He's a neighbor in the constituent area. He's a constituent.
Would you provide a role where you would consult him or advise him on what he should do in his actions as a board member?
As a member of this plan, I have access to any of the board members to have conversations about fiduciary makeup of this plan.
And so do I. So, I mean, I guess that's the point. But I would caution that you would be deemed a conflict as it relates to this board, partly because of your expertise that you bring to it. And I'm concerned that the precedent that you would set in other financial matters, such as advising the Budget and Finance Committees or other members of this body with your expertise, I would not support, if the chair is going to rule of that, I would not support it. So I would deem you, in my opinion, to not have a conflict, and so I would either ask the chair to bring it to a vote or have further discussion, because I don't think the precedent should be set because he's a member of that. There's oftentimes others that would have that, and I don't want to see the precedent set.
Mr. Honeman, frankly, I do share some of Mr. Starr's concern in that it's hard for me to see that your benefit is going to change one way or the other, no matter who's on this board. However, I do believe that we all, as elected officials, should be given the ability, if we believe that potentially this is going to be viewed poorly by our constituents, then at your personal request, I will declare a conflict. Do you still want to go that way, sir?
I believe if through the period of questions that are addressed to each member, at least elected official in this body, I believe that you might find that I not have conflict. However, for the appearance sake, I would respectfully request to be conflicted out on this vote. Just for the vote, if you have questions for my expertise, for my knowledge of this program, certainly would lend that to, but as far as for voting, I would just ask to be excused from the vote.
All right, then I'm going to, I guess, stay the same way I was in the past, specifically at his request because of a view of a potential, then I'm going to rule there's a conflict. The ruling of the chair can be challenged if anybody would like to do so. Seeing no challenge, then, sir, I would direct you not to participate in this matter. Is there any discussion on this matter? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Tremblay, how do you vote on this?
Yes.
I am... Okay, my screen showed briefly something different than what showed up there. That was my pause. But it appears to be incorrect, because obviously it should reflect that Mr. Honeman did not vote. And Mr. Traney, I want to confirm that was a correct vote for you. Well, that's what I saw on my screen, but it didn't reflect there either. Could we redo that? I typically try to check that what shows up there is exactly what's on my screen, sir. At this point, could I instead request we re-vote? Because there were errors? All right. We are voting on the Police and Fire Board appointments, and what happened was the screen showed a vote that is not the same as the vote that showed up here. Specifically, it showed Mr. Honeman voting, and he did not vote. And it showed Mr. Traney as a yes, and he was a no. Yes, sir. I'd like to... There you go. Let's try it again, please. Mr. Tremblay, on the appointment, are you...
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Traney? That's fine now? That's correct. All right. The vote shows that this was approved 10-0. Thank you. All right. The next item before us is 9 Delta 10. And I need a motion.
Move approval. I have two changes that need to be made on that document. On page 2, line 21, the amount should read $2,906,263. And on the same page, line 27 should read $240,440.
Is there a second for that? Thank you. Is there discussion? Is there opposition to the amendment? Mr. Tremblay, do you agree with the amendment?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, that amendment passes unanimously. We're back to the main matter as amended. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote on the matter as amended. Mr. Tremblay?
Yes.
Thank you. And that passes unanimously. All right. We are now at 9E1. This is a internal audit report on the procurement card review. Mr. Hall?
Move to approve.
The A version?
I want to substitute the A version on this.
All right. Did you hit Ernie? Was there a second? Is there discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Starr.
It's mostly just a question perhaps for the city manager. Do we use this extensively to buy fuel, these P cards? Automotive fuels in particular?
In some cases,
Yeah, does that
not extensively.
Not extensively, in your opinion? So we don't really bypass, I know we have a negotiated fuel agreement, and it wouldn't apply if we use these cards then, or does it still apply if these are purchased through the P cards?
To the chair, Mr. Starr, we do pay for fuel using the procurement card. We have the special procurement card set up within the petroleum where we buy bulk fuel. And so we buy bulk fuel with these credit cards. Fuel for vehicles is paid through fleet service, and there are fuel cards for all municipal vehicles.
Okay, so the individual P cards that some folks carry around, then they're not, all of them aren't allowed to buy fuel, or is that true? Do all of the cards have fuel access to them?
The fuel cards are issued by the vehicle, and
All right.
they are supposed to use that fuel card. They are not supposed to use their procurement card.
I understand. Do they?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay.
They use the fuel card.
All right. Thank you. That's all,
It's still the public.
Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Is there objection to accepting? Seeing none, Mr. Trombley, you're all right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, then that matter is accepted. You have to do them individually.
Okay.
We are now finished with the E section, and we're moving on to the F section of our agenda. The first item then is 9F1. This is an AO 77, an ordinance amending Municipal Code Chapter 4.40 to reauthorize continuation of the South Central Clean Air Authority Commission beyond the sunset date.
I move to introduce and set a new hearing date for this of October the 14th.
Is there a third? Thank you. That item is introduced with a public hearing date of October 14th. The next item before us is 9F2. This is AO 78. It's an ordinance amending.
Madam Chair, if I could.
Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor.
I'm sorry. As I look at the schedule, I know in our executive meeting we talked about the 14th, but I think the 11th is the first meeting in October, followed by the 25th. So the 14th is kind of the deadline when these things sunset, but the meeting date that we would have would be, I think, either the 11th or the 25th.
Good catch, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask if there would be objection to changing the hearing date till the 11th on that last matter. Seeing no objection, then, we are going to change the public hearing date to the 11th. All right, the next item before us is 9F2. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 4.60 to reauthorize continuation of the Mountain View Community Rec Center Advisory Commission. Mr. Hall?
Move to introduce and set a hearing date of October the 11th.
Second.
Third. Thank you. That item is introduced with public hearing date of the 11th. 9F3, this is AO 79. It's an ordinance amending Code 4.90 to reauthorize continuation of the Watershed and Natural Resource Advisory Commission. Mr. Hall?
Move to introduce and set a hearing date of October the 11th.
Third.
That item is introduced with a public hearing date of the 11th. The next one would be 9F5.
Move to approve.
Okay, this is an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code Title 8 to add new offenses for sitting or lying down on sidewalks in the downtown improvement district and for pedestrian interference. Is there a third?
This introduction item will need a third.
Third? Yeah. Who was the third? Ms. Drummond, thank you. And that's set for public hearing at our next meeting.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, I'd ask that if it's possible, we either do a work session and/or maybe a public hearing or a hearing at the Public Safety Committee for August.
I'd support the latter.
All right, the request was to refer this to the Public Safety Committee. Is that your request, Mr. Honeman?
Yes, Madam Chair.
The administration want to comment on that?
We'd be okay with that as long as we can schedule something before the next meeting.
Mr. Honeman, will that work for you?
It's possible. It is possible, yes.
All right. Ms. Drummond, do you want to comment on it?
Actually, I was going to comment because the next Public Safety Committee meeting isn't until August.
That's correct. We could set a meeting and perhaps as we just go through the meeting further, we may have another matter to hear at that time.
All right, so he's indicated willingness to meet earlier than August.
Yes.
All right, with that, is there objection to, I'd like to just refer it then to Public Safety Committee. Oh, Mr. Trainee.
I've got a question for you, ma'am. Can we have a statement of economic effects of this? Because I see it only pertains to downtown area. I want to know what it's going to cost and who's going to bear the burden of its enforcement, ma'am.
Thank you. And we do need a C to the administration. Thank you. All right, that item is introduced and referred to committee, and then we can leave the public hearing date then on the 26th, Mr. Honeman?
Yes.
All right. That finishes, I believe, our consent agenda. Oh, we need to vote, pardon me? What do we need to vote on? It's just introduction. All right, I'd like, if you were appointed to a board or commission, we'd very much like to meet you and thank you. So could you come forward if you just were appointed to something?
My name is John Knox. I was appointed to the Health and Human Services Committee.
Thank you very much for your willingness to serve.
Good evening. Karen Kasich-Michelson, Hams.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very much. We appreciate your work. All right. With that, let's see, appearance requests can't start before 6, but we could continue 11, couldn't we? All right. The next item before us then is 11A, which is AM 376. This is a Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals appointment, and I do not believe we have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Is there discussion? Is there objection to this appointment? Oh, here, just put it. Mr. Trombley, do you object, or how do you vote on the appointment?
No, I do not object.
I apologize for not stating that clearly, sir.
No, that's all right.
All right. So that he voted yes. Does anyone else vote, please? Would everyone else vote, please? Thank you. That passes unanimously. The next item before us is 11B. This is AM 378, change order number 3 to purchase order number 20100-211 with Honeywell Building Solutions to provide building control materials and services on an as-required basis for the Municipality Public Works Department, Maintenance and Operations, $150,000.
Move to approve.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Trombley, how are you on 11B?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Drummond? Thank you. That item passes unanimously. The next item before us is 11C. This is AR 144, a resolution of the Assembly approving the Heritage Land Bank 2011 Annual Work Program and 2012 through 16 5-year management plan. We had a public hearing that was closed, and we were in the middle of amendments. And if I recall, Ms. Johnston had an amendment that was on the floor, and I'm looking for it. It's in the packet. All right. Do you want to, could you restate the amendment that we were working on while I look for it, Ms. Johnston?
We had not passed this amendment?
No, sir. No, ma'am.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah, whoever.
We passed your first one, if I remember, but not the second one.
It is on page 31 of Region 2, which is the Southeast Anchorage Bowl, Section 3, and it's HLB parcel number 2.135 and number 2.136. And my amendment was to, and I can't, sorry, I don't have the line items, but these two parcels located in Potter Valley area zone PLI may be considered for survey or replat once new developments and on-site evaluations are determined to allow for residential and access reserved through a portion of 2136 and access through a portion of 2135 per the Potter Valley Land Use Analysis NAO 99-144. Consideration should be given to open space and any required MOU with the Alaska Department of Transportation and Department of Fish and Game. And if I could, I'd like to add one amendment to that last sentence that maybe would make this.
If there's, you can try, and if there's no objection from the body,
Okay.
we'll incorporate.
But I'd rather say consideration should be given to open prescribe. Let me, consideration should be given to prescribed open space and any required MOU with the Alaska Department of Transportation and Department of Fish and Game. And I'll give it to the clerk.
So basically, you want to
Add the word prescribed.
Prescribed.
Yeah.
Is there objection to that from anyone?
You need a second? I'll second it.
Okay, that was incorporated without objection. All right, we're back to your main amendment then, Ms. Johnson. Do you have any further thing you'd like to clarify on it?
No, we did both Amendment 1 and, no.
Madam Chair?
All right, Ms. Drummond, you're next.
I actually have what I would like to be considered as a friendly amendment to this item.
We don't have friendly amendments.
So you'll have to give it a try and see what happens, Ms. Drummond.
Okay. It actually replaces the line beginning with considerations, and I'm going to pass this out right now. There are enough copies to extend to the administration.
Could you try reading it, Ms. Drummond, now?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Where Ms. Johnston's amendment begins with the word considerations, I would replace that with the remainder of 2-136 is designated as open space reserve, while the remainder of 2-135 is slated for an MOU with Alaska DOT and ADFNG.
All right. Is there a second to that? Is there objection to this change?
If I could explain, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Attached to the amendment is a reference to the Potter Valley Area Land Use Analysis, a couple of pages from that, and the Planning and Zoning Commission's resolution of 99-036, as well as the map that shows that these two properties that are referred to in the amendment are included in that map. The Potter Valley Area Land Use Analysis is a legal document that the amendment brought forward by Ms. Johnston would change, and I'm not sure it's a good idea to change an already approved document.
Ms. Johnson?
I don't see where I've changed it, actually, by adding the word prescribed. I'm just saying that they need, in fact, it all says that they need to address anything that has been brought up by the Potter Valley Land Use Analysis and AO 99-14. I think we're getting rather redundant here, and I'm getting a little worried if we're going beyond the scope. As you can see with 2135, there's a line drawn in it, but that's not necessarily the line that's going to be reserved. And I think we're starting to split hairs here. It's well put out in the Potter Valley Land Use Analysis, and I don't know. I just think we're going overboard.
Mr. Starr?
Well, I have two comments. I won't be supporting the very specific language where we apparently are designating open space as opposed to the more suggestive language with some flexibility that Ms. Johnson put forth. So I'll be a no vote on that amendment. But if there's any of either of you two that can give me some clarity on 99-144, I'm not certain what that is. It looks like the action that they took was 99-036. So I'm not sure I know what 99044 is. Could somebody tell me what that is?
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Ms. Drummond.
I believe 99-144 was the approval of the Potter Valley area land use analysis.
If I could ask if the...
By us?
By the Assembly, yes, sir.
If I could ask the administration, do you have anybody here, Mr. Vacalis, that could clarify?
I don't see anybody in the audience from HLB or Real Estate Services. Am I missing somebody?
Well, I'll assume it's correct. If it's, I mean, it's just the Assembly action. I thought there would be more stated discussion at that time when we approved the plan as opposed to trying to do it in an HLB manner. So if there was further discussion at our discussion, I don't remember it when we approved 144 on the open space discussion. So I'll defer. But again, I'd like a little bit more flexible language as it proposed by Ms. Johnson.
Anyone else on Ms. Drummond's amendment? Please vote on Ms. Drummond's amendment. Mr. Trombley?
No.
And that amendment failed 5-6. Okay, we're back to Ms. Johnston's amendment. Is there any further discussion on that? Hearing and seeing none, please vote on Ms. Johnston's amendment. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
And that amendment passes 9-3. Mr. Flynn? Oh, thank you. I'm having a bad day with my
Did the mayor
tongue
vote
doesn't
again?
match me. Okay. My pardons. All right. Do we have any additional amendments? Mr. Hall?
Yes. I have an amendment. It's on page 26. If you're looking at the package, it's actually on page 193 of the packet. It's chapter 3, Point Warrenzoff closed compost facility. And what I would like to do in that last paragraph is delete the last sentence and replace that with Heritage Land Bank will strive to achieve maximum public benefit regarding these lands.
And I've apparently misplaced, again, my amendment. Does everybody have that? Thank you, Mr. Hall. All right, seeing no one in queue, please vote on Mr. Hall's amendment. Mr. Trombley?
Can you repeat it? I had a hard time hearing him. And I don't have the amendment in front of me.
All right, the amendment is to delete under the section called Point Warrenzoff closed compost facility. It's to delete the words, the cleanup will be in anticipation of a land exchange with the airport for lands encompassing portions of the Anchorage Coastal Trail. Any further discussion? All right, please vote on the amendment.
Yes.
And that amendment passes unanimously. Is there anything else? Ms. Drummond?
Madam Chair, thank you. On page 237 of our notebooks are a series of amendments that I would like to bring forward.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Except for the one that is really similar to the one that was just passed, but when we get to that, I'll let you know. Plan Amendment Number 1, Chapter 3, Subsection B, page 23 of the plan. Do you want me to read it?
Yes,
Madam Chair?
ma'am. Well, either you can or I will.
Okay, I'll be happy to read it. Let's see. We are adding on page 23 the following new subsection after Laurel Acres subdivision in the middle of the page. TSAIA land. HLB will endeavor to purchase Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport property north of municipal HLB parcels to protect a contiguous greenbelt buffer for the Tony Knowles Coastal Trail. Boundaries to be determined by a municipal TSAIA Community Coastal Trail Working Group initiated by HLB. If successful in the purchase, HLB will transfer the property to the Municipal Department of Parks and Recreation for a dedicated parkland addition to Point Warrenzoff Park.
And if you could hit your screen, ma'am. Thank you. All right, that amendment is before us. Would you like to speak to it, Ms. Drummond?
No, that's fairly self-explanatory. The coastal trail, as most people know, runs on an extremely narrow piece of land around the airport. And the airport, when the bluff that is found immediately adjacent to the coastal trail in many areas falls due to natural erosion, the coastal trail is the one that's going to get hit and disappear. The airport would like to build to the edge of their lands. However, we have to strike a balance between the needs of the public and our crown jewel of our trail system, i.e. the coastal trail, and I would appreciate support on this amendment.
Mr. Hall.
I will actually be voting against this amendment. My reason for that being that we've got a Parks and Recs department that is already stretched absolutely to its max, and the fiscal note that would be attached to this in regards to additional funding for this maintenance is a concern of mine.
Mr. Birch.
I'm a no vote as well. Having worked at the airport, I can assure you that the coastal trail's not shutting down anytime soon. I think that the airport is in fact the crown jewel of the community. When you look at the jobs, opportunity, the development, and the growth that we've enjoyed, and I think by initiating or pursuing land acquisitions that would further fence in or limit airport development expansion, I think is not a good thing. And like I say, the coastal trail's not going anywhere. I think if there's damage related to some of the settlements that's referred to, I'm absolutely certain that accommodations can be made to continue that. So I will not be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make sure, first of all, we did respond to Ms. Drummond's amendments in writing, and I'm hoping all members got those comments. Okay. Very good. And just to reiterate what the previous two speakers said, this action would be most appropriate if it was initiated by the Parks Department subsequent to Parks Planning, and taking into consideration funding not just for the acquisition but for the continuing maintenance. So we would not support this amendment at this time.
Please vote on this amendment. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
That amendment fails 5-7. I'm having trouble with math. 6. Thank you. I apologize.
Maybe we need an addition at the bottom of the chart.
All right.
You know, a number at the bottom of each
All right.
column.
My 2 daughters with math degrees will be upset with me. Thank you. And anything else, Ms. Drummond?
Yes, ma'am. Amendment number 2, same page. Chapter 3, subsection B, page 23, again under acquisitions, municipal entitlement lands. As referenced under Chapter 11 of this, under Chapter 1 of this plan, HLB will continue to work for the conveyance of lands identified in the 1986 Agreement for the Conveyance of Land of the State of Alaska to the Municipality of Anchorage.
Would you hit your screen, ma'am? Thank you. And
Second.
that is seconded. Would you like to speak further to it?
That's just, I believe, that's self-explanatory.
All right. Seeing no one in queue, please vote. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Mr. Hall is not in the room. So, Mr. Hall, did you want to vote on amendment number 2, or should... That amendment passes 10-1.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Drummond.
Number 3, we'll go on page 25 of the plan, subsection, Chapter 3, subsection C, current and continuing projects. This eliminates, I think this might be the one that Mr. Hall's amendment that passed. No, sorry, it's not. Okay. Let's see. The end of the paragraph that begins West Anchorage District Plan, right under the photo. The amendment is to delete the final sentence in that paragraph that reads, HLB desires to continue negotiations with TSAIA regarding this and other lands in the airport area with the potential for a global exchange of several parcels to benefit long-range plans.
Yeah. Okay. I'm waiting for...
No.
Thank you. Anything, you want to speak further to it, Ms. Drummond?
No, ma'am.
Any discussion? Mr. Hall?
No, I support this one with Ms. Drummond.
All right. Please vote. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
And that passes unanimously. Go ahead, Ms. Drummond.
Thank you, ma'am. Move Plan Amendment Number 4, Chapter 3, subsection C, page 25, regarding the Anchorage Detox Facility. That's most of the way down the page. Adding a sentence at the end of the Anchorage Detox Facility paragraph. In the event relocation of the facility remains, the option favored over upgrade or improvement of the present facility and extension of the present lease, potential use as a public access area to the Tony Knowles Coastal Trail will be explored.
There's the second. Thank you. Anything further on that, Ms.
No,
Drummond?
ma'am.
All right. Seeing Mr. Hall?
I also support this one with Ms. Drummond.
All right. Please vote. Mr. Trombley, how are you on this amendment?
Yes.
Ms. Drummond, you need to vote.
Oh, sorry.
And that passes unanimously. Go ahead, Ms. Drummond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Plan Amendment Number 5, Chapter 3, subsection C, page 25, bottom of the page, on the section beginning Compensatory Mitigation Program Wetlands Evaluation. There is an addition to the section, I believe it's in the middle of page 26, right above the words reverter clauses. The addition reads as follows: HLB will establish a compensatory mitigation program, open meeting policy, so that the public is notified and may attend meetings between HLB and the Corps of Engineers when mitigation bank proposals are discussed.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, that is before us. Anything further you want to say on it, Ms. Drummond?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes, I'm just wondering on this, how is it currently handled, and how would you, what would you do to make an open meetings policy on this?
We're prepared to respond to that, Tammy.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Or either
Or
one.
whoever.
Yep.
We currently have been meeting with the Corps of Engineers and an interagency review team, which consists of resource agency staff with specific expertise in hydrology, habitat. There are folks from EPA, Fish and Wildlife Service, agencies like that. We just felt that, as our comment, the Corps of Engineers notices out any proposals for additions to the mitigation bank, and there's a 30-day public comment period. In addition, when we...
Hey, Jacqueline, can you put me in queue?
Excuse me? Sorry, when we move to put land in the mitigation bank, we take it out of the HLB inventory, which also requires public review and comment both before the HLBAC and the Assembly. So we felt that any additional policy would be redundant to what was already in place.
So basically, the only process that's not in the open meeting is just staff getting together and doing the technical work. Is that correct?
I believe that's a correct interpretation.
Otherwise, this is redundant.
Yeah, the initial meetings are called by the Corps of Engineers and held according to their regulations, so.
So there's at least two opportunities for the public to. Three.
The Corps of Engineers notices it out, and there's a 30-day public comment period. Then we need to take it to the HLBAC to remove it from our inventory. There's another public comment period, and then it needs to go again to the Assembly.
I'm sorry, I can't hear her.
Speak right into your mic here.
It goes to the Heritage Land Bank Advisory Commission to remove it from our inventory, and then the land that would be placed in the mitigation bank also has to be reviewed by the Assembly.
I will be a no vote on this. I just feel that we're, again, wrapping ourselves around an axle, as I did with the amendment that I proposed, and so I will be a no vote.
No, I think we summarized it pretty well. We don't support this amendment, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. Honeman?
I guess I'm wondering if we're already having public meetings, where is it listed that these meetings are public, and how is it set? Who's responsible? Is it the Corps or is it the city?
Well, there are three separate meetings. I'm not sure what the Corps' policy is on attending the meetings, but they do notice out every addition of land to the mitigation bank for public review. And there's a 30-day public comment period.
I mean, I guess I'm failing to see if there's any harm with putting in language that we notice the meetings for the open to the public. We had a whole room full last meeting, folks that want to participate in the public process. Just curious as to what the harm would be.
Could you identify yourself for the record, please?
My name's Carly Gaskill. I'm with the Heritage Land Bank.
All right, thank you. Did you want to, you don't have to respond, but you can if you would like at this point.
Our feeling was that because there were several opportunities for public comment, that the addition would be redundant, and we don't have any control over the Corps of Engineers, the meetings that they call pursuant to their regulations.
Thank you. Mr. Trombley?
I just want to say that I apologize if some of this is redundant. I have a hard time hearing everybody, but on page 239, the HLB 5-year plan, it actually addresses that issue, and HLB gives a pretty detailed response as far as, open meeting process, and so Amendment 5 is redundant. It's already taking place, so there's no need to do anything since it's already happening. That's all, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Hall?
Yes. I received quite an education from Mr. Phil Shepard with the Great Land Trust in my dealings with the Campbell Creek Estuary. And he was of the opinion that there's a great process in place with the Corps in regards to this. So I will be a no vote. I believe there's much too redundancy would be going on.
Mr. Mayor? No?
I'm sorry, it was me.
Well, I have you next.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Mr. Vacalis.
I just wanted to reiterate, it's the Corps' process when it gets to that point. And that was already stated by our folks from Real Estate Services, but it's the Corps' process when it gets to that point. Up until that point, it's our process.
Thank you. Mr. Starr?
How much discussion is about dollars and cents at these meetings? I know there are boundaries and trades and things like that, but do we get into active negotiations at these meetings with how much money's on the table for some of these credit exchanges?
You mean with the Corps of Engineers?
Yeah, or in
No.
the meetings in general. I mean, is there a discussion where the public would best be served as to how much money we're talking about? Do we oftentimes talk about value in dollars being exchanged?
Not with the Corps of Engineers, no, that they don't involve themselves with that.
All right, thank you.
Seeing no one else in queue, please vote on this amendment. Mr. Trombley?
No.
And that amendment fails 3-8. Ms. Drummond, you want to continue?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amendment 6 on my document is the same, or is real similar to what was proposed by Mr. Hall earlier and passed, so I will not be bringing that one forward. I will be bringing forward amendment number 7. Chapter 3, amend by adding a new subsection F at page 28. The subsection F is to include transfer of title and land management authority of HLB parcels 4-032, 033, and 034 to the Municipality of Anchorage Parks and Recreation Department with the intent that it become permanently dedicated parkland with detailed ordinance language to be written with community and agency input to ensure that all easements, plat notes, and restrictions are appropriately included in the land transfer.
Is there a second? Did you want to say anything further, Ms. Drummond?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. We oppose this amendment as well. Similar to the reasoning behind amendment number 1, transferring is a management authority, an administrative decision, and it should be initiated by the Parks Department contingent upon a parks plan and their ability to manage and maintain the property, which is not appropriate in the HLB plan.
Mr. Hall?
Basically, for the same reason as 1. Again, I say I got quite an education with Mr. Shepard when we were dealing with the Campbell Creek Estuary and how we got into the discussion there, whether that become a conservation area or we changed it to park. Either way, there's tremendous costs connected with it, and that's my concern, so I will be a no vote.
Ms. Johnston?
I'll also be a no vote. This is actually in Mr. Birch's in my district, and I've spent quite a bit of time with Section 36, and I think it's moving forward, and I think it's going to be providing the community what they want, and if there is with this, again, that only makes sure that that property is locked up forever. So I'm not sure what the issue is, and I will be a no vote.
Mr. Starr?
No, I think we drift into what the executive branch is better at with their talents and their staff. So I'd be happy to wait for executive branch recommendations when that day comes, and not do it through this plan nor the amendment. So thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure I understand which parcels we're talking about. Are these the ones on the south side of the airport or west side of the airport? Okay. So this is in Ms. Drummond's district, right?
That's right.
Okay.
I was going to bring forward that correction.
All right. Okay. So we're talking about basically the areas adjacent to the airport over by the coastal trail, right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just needed to know where we were. Thank you.
Ms. Drummond?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think I need to speak to this. If you look at the map, our document, page 210, it's the map of HLB Property Region 4. Thank you for correcting, Mr. Flynn. These are definitely in West Anchorage. The majority of these parcels that are mentioned in this amendment are tidal lands. They would not require any work or expenditure of monies by the Parks Department. It is merely preserving land that is currently wooded or covered with trails, or passed through with trails, and protects these lands. It is not likely to be buildable land as far as the airport's operations, which are certainly already well provided for. And the buffers will increase in value to the community, especially if the West Airport Park is fully developed, and that is already beginning. We had a meeting last night with the airport management, the Sand Lake Community Council and Turnagain Community Council. Airport Communications Committee met and learned of new plans for development in South and West Air Park area. Thank you.
Mr. Birch?
Yeah, I'm a no vote on this. This is basically The airport, and given my experience with the airport, the opportunities to expand to the east towards town or to the south are severely limited, and certainly any access or improvements or expansion to the west towards the water or to the north, where the preponderance of the aircraft activity departures and arrivals take place, should be supported, and turning that into parkland does not help things at all. So I am a no vote.
Seeing no one else in queue, please vote. This is on Amendment 7. Mr. Trombley, how do you vote?
Yes.
That amendment fails 5-6. Go ahead, Ms. Drummond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amendment 8, Chapter 4, subsection A, page 29. Hold on a minute. It's deleting the paragraph, the last paragraph on the page that begins, HLB will also continue negotiations with the state of Alaska for a global exchange of lands with the Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport, with a goal towards protecting access to the coastal trail and safeguard other area trails and recreation sites.
Would you hit your screen, Ms. Drummond?
Sorry.
Second.
Ms. Drummond, do you want to amplify?
Not at this time, thank you.
Mr. Hall?
I'm in support of Ms. Drummond on this amendment.
Seeing no one else in queue, please vote on Amendment 8. Mr. Trombley, where are you on this?
Yes.
And that amendment passes unanimously. Go ahead, Ms. Drummond.
Thank you. Amendment 9, Chapter 4, adds a new section, subsection E, conservation easements on page 36 of the draft plan. Subsection E shall incorporate language consistent with the preservation of parcels with conservation easements, including but not limited to HLB parcels 5-001, 002A, 019, 020, and 021, and other parcels to be identified. The addition of this new subsection E is consistent with recommendations in the West Anchorage District Plan, as brought forward by planning staff and supported by the West Anchorage District Plan Planning Group.
I'm waiting for a second.
Second.
Anything else, Ms. Drummond, on that?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, staff will address our concerns with this one.
We consider this amendment premature. We're just now starting our conservation easement. It's still evolving, our process. We would like to consider this new subsection in the future, maybe for the next plan that comes out. The issue is that establishing and maintaining conservation easements requires significant funding. If the Corps of Engineers approves these conservation easements, and we can add lands to our mitigation bank, the mechanism for this funding becomes available. But if it's unavailable, we will be unable to establish conservation easements. And like I say, we're just in the opening process of developing this.
Mr. Hall?
I will not be supporting this one again. It's a cost information, once again, I picked up in dealing with the Campbell Creek Estuary, and am working with the Great Land Trust to raise a significant amount of money for the conservation effort of that area for the next number of years. So it's quite expensive. Ms. Drummond?
Yes, Madam Chair. My question is for Ms. Gaskill. The HLB plan, is the 5-year management plan redone annually? So in other words,
currently it is.
Okay, so this could be considered a year from now in the next version.
Unless something changes.
Okay, since we've already been discussing it, I won't withdraw my amendment right now, but Madam Chair, I will be voting no on it, if I get a commitment that it will be considered in the future.
Apparently you have that.
Thank you.
Mr. Starr.
I'm kind of ignorant to the parcels, but are they zoned right now beyond anything PLI, or all of them zoned? In general speak, is there already zoning designations to some of these parcels?
We're not sure right now. We may be able to find that information in the plan if we poke around for a minute.
Yeah, well, I guess that if they're already PLI, then we've got a protection interest, and I guess no, because if they are already zoned a specific use, somebody may be under development or have developmental plans, and again, I just think it's wise to do this at this section, so I'm a no vote on the amendment as well.
Seeing no one else in queue, please vote on amendment number 9. Mr. Trombley?
No.
And that amendment fails unanimously. Mr. Drummond, go ahead, your last one.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam. This is not staying on. Sorry. Amendment number 10, Chapter 4, adding a new subsection F. That is on page 36 of the plan, 203 of our notebook. Subsection F shall incorporate language consistent with the preservation of HLB parcel 5023 by transfer to the Parks and Recreation Department with the intent that the parcel will become dedicated parkland. The preservation of HLB parcel 5023 for dedicated parkland is consistent, again, with the recommendations in the West Anchorage District Plan as brought forward by planning staff and supported by the West Anchorage District Planning Group.
Second.
Anything else on that, Mr. Drummond?
Not at this time.
Mr. Hall?
I will not be supporting this. I will not be supporting this for reasons that I've stated in other motions. It's literally the cost and overload in the Department of Parks and Rec.
Mr. Vacalis?
The administration does not support either for all the reasons that's been mentioned before.
Okay. Seeing no one else in queue, please vote. Whoop, there. Mr. Trombley, how do you vote on Amendment 10?
No.
And that amendment fails 4-7. Anything else, Ms. Drummond?
That's it. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Is there any additional discussion or amendments on this matter? Mr. Starr?
Why we're having in front of us here, I think it's very important to look at the municipal resources for what they are, and in often cases I believe that they need to actively be pursued as the best use, and that may be for a development engine therein. So I guess I have a question in my comments with that and the importance of the land ownership the municipality has. Mr. Mayor, we don't have any prohibition, or do we have a mechanism if there's a development consideration on any HLB lands? If I'm a developer and I see lands owned by the city, are we user-friendly when it comes to those folks approaching your office and saying, I'd like to do something with municipally held lands? How do we handle that?
Well, I think we're very user-friendly if it's developable land that's surplus to municipal interest. Certainly if it's land that we think that there may be a future use for a school site or inclusion in a park, we obviously look very closely at those. But, for example, it was brought up at the last meeting about Girdwood properties. We're actively marketing Girdwood properties, and if any member knows a developer that would like to come in and buy several dozen lots, we're open for business and we're interested, and I think we're very user-friendly for the most part, yeah.
Well, my only critique, and I would hope to have some advice outside of this meeting, is that it appears that it takes a long time to urge the process along for the selection, the negotiations, the public process. I don't want to err to that fact on who decides what's last and best use of the properties, but there seems to be, such as the Girdwood discussion, the market conditions change, and I don't want to rush into disposals, but when we're putting 18 two-year 36-month discussions on the table, a developer would need very, very deep pockets to survive that. So I think we've created a bureaucracy here that needs to be reevaluated on just how often and quickly we can dispose of municipal properties that make sense. That's my 2 cents on it. So I'm happy to have the plan, happy to have the discussion, but I think the whole process seems to be laden with bureaucracy. So thank you.
Seeing no one else in queue, please vote on the document as amended. Mr. Trombley? Mr. Trombley, how do you vote?
Yes.
And that amended document passes unanimously. We're now at appearance requests. At this type, I'd like to call Mr. Joseph Princiata. Are you here, sir?
I'll try to keep track of the time. My name is Joseph Princiota. The Joseph is Josef. Princiota is Princiota. I'm appearing before you tonight on my own behalf. I don't represent any other individual or any group or organization. I sent out an email about my concerns. I was wondering if you've gotten the email.
Yes.
All of you, then you know the topic is hot particles that might be in the air over Anchorage and coming from events at Fukushima. These particles, if you've had a chance to check the references that I gave you in the email, you know have been recorded by independent scientists operating on a volunteer basis because the particles are not being counted and the information is not being given to us by official sources. And I think it would be nice if we could get the numbers. I'm an interested party, so to speak. Since my time is so limited, I wanted to give you a little demonstration of what a hot particle is all about. This is not background radiation. I have a counter that can count background radiation, give a person an idea. But a hot particle, which I have in this little container here, doesn't act that way. By the way, the hot particle I have in this container I purchased the way you purchased yours, because this hot particle is identical to the one in your home. I'm sure all of you have got a fire smoke detector, and that's what a little alpha emitter inside the smoke detector does. It ionizes the air in a very short distance, and it helps you detect if there's any smoke in your house. So this is nuclear energy serving humankind in a very good way and actually saving your life if it's outside your body. But if a little particle of this material, which is americium-241, has a half-life of about 430 some odd years. But in your body it has a half-life of about 50 years, because if you ingest this or you inhale it, your body thinks it's calcium, sends it to the bones, and it stays for about 50 years half-life. My counter can't pick it up because it only radiates about the size of a golf ball. It's an alpha particle radiator. An alpha particle is a punch with a really short arm. So as it's drifting around, you don't know it until it gets close to where you are. And when it gets inhaled, if it gets lodged in your lung, or if it gets lodged in your intestines, it does a lot of irritating to its neighbors. It's just not a good thing to have inside the body, and yet it's helping us a great deal, and it is safe in our smoke detectors. So these very small particles that were sent up into the atmosphere by some of the explosions at Fukushima drifted to Seattle during the month of April, and we know that Seattle's count was just about half of Tokyo's count. That is, each day in Tokyo, any individual was breathing in 10 or more of these particles every day, 300 during the month. In Seattle, it was between 5 and 10. This is according to Mr. Arnie Gunderson, who, as I say, I referenced in the email. If you have a chance, Mr. Gunderson is a well-known expert in the field and says the important thing is not so much how we recognize background radiation, but the fact that there are small particles in the air, and if there's another event at Fukushima, I would hope that we have the capacity to test. I was prepared to show you a bunch of screen captures that indicate what happens when you search for this information. It is not available at the EPA. It's not available where they reference you. It's called Air Now. And so this is kind of FYI. I don't think there is any reason at this time for anyone in Anchorage to be anxious about the fact that they might be breathing in hot particles. I believe we're safe. I would like to know.
Thank you, sir. And we did get that email reference, so thank you. Mr. Honeman has a question, though.
Mr. Prince-Gato, thank you for bringing this to our concern. And,
yes, sir.
And who would you recommend, and I did see most of your email, and I'm sorry I haven't read the whole thing through its entirety, but who would you recommend give us either a briefing or official notification? Would it be the Nuclear Regulatory Commission? Or?
Well, actually, I spoke with Mr. Clyde Pierce locally, who seems to be well up on the subject, but he indicated to me that the data might be hidden behind some kind of password. He wasn't sure, but he's local, and I intend to cultivate that relationship and find out. My thoughts were that a small committee of people who might be interested would also advise me in what way to find this, because I have searched to get this information. On Sunday, I will be presenting at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at 9 o'clock in the morning a presentation about the magnitude of Fukushima. We do not, in our news, we are not getting the factual information. There could be a release, a burning spent fuel pool that would send a great deal of particles. I don't think the NRC is where we need our information, and I think our local people actually know where to get it. If they could be encouraged, perhaps, by some call or some smile from you, I'm sure we can get the job done. And if there's another event, we'll be ready. Because if these particles are in the air, I'll close with this. If you're working on large air filters in Anchorage, buses, and trucks and such, they're finding out in Tokyo this is the real danger. You go to an air filter and you have to treat it kind of carefully. I don't think we'll reach that point in Anchorage, and we'll definitely know we're safe if we can get some help.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I envy the person who designed this room. Their peripheral vision must have been remarkable.
Yeah. I think the design frustrates us frequently. But
thank you very much. Thank you.
Is Alex on here, please? Come forward, sir.
Hi, my name is Alex On, AHN. The reason I came here is because of the false alarm code 8.40.010. The current code of the $25 annual fee to maintain the database is excessive. The initial registration fee is actually okay, but there is no need to update or change the system. So why is there an annual fee of $25 every year just because you have an alarm system? I also believe that the current code of one allowable false alarm a year is extreme. Since March of 2006, I've had 5 false alarms, 2 were this year. False alarms can be caused by any number of things: extreme air temperature, blowing air, insects, and mice. My 2 false alarms were caused by mice. We have since removed the mice infestation, but it took a month of diagnosis, system resets, close observations, calling the alarm security companies, trying to find out why alarm was going off all the time. My question to the Assembly and to the Police Department is the current alarm code system designed to discourage false alarms? If so, I would actually recommend the following. After the alarm, actually I just misread that, sorry. I would actually recommend 2 false alarm allowances per year, and then after that, to discourage abuse, raise the fine if necessary. I think 1 false alarm is not enough, because half the time you just don't know what's going on. And also, I believe the $25 annual fee, I wonder if that was actually kind of a mistype. When I read the code, it didn't specify an annual fee as a maintenance. It just specified that it's just an annual fee for registration. So maybe that just needs some clarification.
Thank you, sir. in the discussion, if I remember correctly, it was that it considered that there was some kind of an administrative burden for the police department to maintain the database, I believe. Is that your memory, sir? Do you remember of the fees, if you don't mind? Thank you. There are some questions, so don't leave. Well, wait a minute. Let's get all the questions out there before you come up. Mr. Honeman, you're next.
Well, first, I guess there was a comment that there are in some jurisdictions, some municipalities, they stop responding to alarms anywhere whatsoever due to the increased burden upon its staff responding to a location. I mean, it's kind of like the sky is falling, the little boy who cried wolf, I guess, syndrome. But alarms do provide a necessary process. Are you aware that the fire department bills $500 for each successful alarm, false alarm?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So it seems to me that $25 for a second and then $125 after that. I mean, it seems like it starts at a smaller rate than with the fire department, perhaps because there's 3 or 4 guys going out on one truck as opposed to one single car.
Yes, sir. But due to I've called the fire department. I've spoken with them at that. I've also spoken with the police department. I've spoken with separate officers as well. The consensus is that the fire department really does not like going on false alarms. And I don't think the police department does either. However, the police department charges $125. Previously, they charged, I think it was $75, and they had 2 allowable false alarms every quarter. We now taking that to the extreme, just 1 false alarm a year, and you have more room for error in burglar alarm system because of excessive temperature change and so on and so forth. And so we're just kind of, I think, slightly apples to oranges kind of thing comparison, because it is 2 different resources. They are both very important, yes, but they are different.
Thank you. Mr. Starr.
Thank you for bringing the issue forward. Have you had to pay more beyond the registration fee?
Yes, sir. Because I had the 2 false alarms in March and April of this year, because of the weather change, the mice came into the building. We didn't realize, because our motions were designed to be above, be about a foot above the ground level in case of those kind of situations. Well, mice, when they crawled on the desks, they set off the motion. So it took us quite a bit trying to find that.
Yeah, I don't think generally, looking at some of the budgetary indicators that we're seeing on our side, I don't think that there's a general sense that we're sort of picking on the citizenry here in that regard. And I just would want to ask the city manager a question. When we had a previous item on the agenda tonight, it was our revenue summary report, revenues to date per year. We had well under $200,000 revenue shortfall in this particular category. Do you know why we're revenue short on what we anticipated we would collect from alarm fees?
Right off the top of my head, no, I do not. Unless the police department has something on it. I know that there was a grace period that we did authorize for a period of time, and I don't know if that was a factor or not.
Yeah, I guess I bring that answer forward because I was going to dig deeper in the next couple of days. Our revenues are shorter than they were the year before in terms of how many dollars we collect in this category. So I would think that there's a significant policy change other than the increased fees for that. And I wonder if it perhaps isn't waking some people up and working. What testimonies that I remember was it is very expensive and it pulls police off of what perhaps would be a more critical call because they are responding to false alarms. So I'm hoping that the indicators that I'm hearing with the revenue shortfall, not that I would want significant revenue shortfalls, but I think that it's designed to be a deterrent from those that would just casually say, oh, well, false alarm. So I'll dig into it a little bit more, and perhaps there's a more global answer we can send you that's the case. But I don't see us picking on the citizenry. So I appreciate the comments, but it may very well be working to do what we needed to do. Thank you.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hahn, I want to thank you for having the courage to come out this evening, because you and I talked, and you told me after you talked to the mayor's office, they told you to call your assembly representative, and you did. And when you and I talked, I invited you to come and talk to all of us about the issue, because it is an area-wide issue, and I look forward to hearing Chief Smith's response to the question that was asked. Thank you again for being here this evening. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to respond to Mr. Starr's comments, When I talked to the police department, they had, in a period of June 1 to June 22nd, they had 346 false alarms. I guess my main question, and I asked it earlier, was, is this code designed to discourage false alarms so that we can utilize the police department more effectively, or to try and act as a revenue stream?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hunt.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure you're clear on what I've found. My research is that we didn't even meet our revenue targets for this year yet by a significant amount, by $200,000 so far this year. So, I mean, I would put that into discussion for consideration as well. And so, further with that, and I appreciate you doing your homework. What would be helpful for me to know is the trend from this time last year, 21st to or the first to the 21st last year. Did we have more false alarms or what? So it's a moving target, but one that we haven't taken lightly in raising the fees as well as trying to produce a solution to maximize our police force. So thank you. Appreciate the discussion.
Thank you.
Smith, would you come forward just a moment and maybe talk to us about this annual fee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, there is an ongoing administrative burden to administer the program. Primarily, we invest the loan assembly, or dispatch clerk in the section in Dispatch 2 administering the false alarm database, the false alarm billing, the communication. I think it was our dispatch clerk who communicated with Mr. Ahn and is available to answer questions about the alarm ordinance as well as the administration thereof, and it's an ongoing burden. The second question, as I understand from Mr. Ahn, was the legislative intent, if you will. That, of course, is for you all to say, since you're the legislators. But from our perspective, we would like to see fewer false alarms. I did bring that information with me, and I think from 2005 to 2010, briefly, you can see an escalation from 8,041 instances of false alarms in various categories, 7,800 in 2006, 7,900 2007, and then we see it pick up rather precipitously from 8,900 in 2008, 10,800 in 2009, 11,000 last year. It takes a lot of time. It takes officers out of service and things of that nature, so we absolutely would like to discourage false alarms so that our officers their time could be better spent.
Thank you very much. With that, we are going to be taking our dinner break, and when we come back, we'll begin with item 13A on the agenda. We're in recess. Noting that we are on item 13A on the agenda. So at this point, if there's anyone who would like to testify on an ordinance authorizing disposal of a parcel legally described as Lot 8, Block 2, Grecian Hill Subdivision, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Second.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Go ahead and just do it anyway. That item passes 10-0. The next item before us is 13B, and if you remember, we had started this and just passed an amendment from Ms. Gray Jackson. So it's been amended, and the public hearing has been closed, but there's nothing before us on the floor at this time. So I'd like to ask if there are any additional amendments or discussion on the personnel rules. Hearing and seeing none, then please vote on the personnel rules as amended. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
That item passes 10-1. The next item before us is item 14A on our agenda, and this item is AR 164. This is a resolution the municipality approving the Crestview Water Intertie and providing for the assessment of benefited properties at time of service connection from AWU, accompanied by AM 353. If you'd like to speak on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed. Is there any discussion? Mr. Starr.
I just have a question, and I couldn't let it go, but from AWU's perspective, are we going to tear up the newly paved street? And I guess if we are going to tear up a street that was remodeled less than 8 months ago, we shouldn't do that anymore.
You want to transport?
Well, it is. And why and how did it happen that we couldn't tie it in with the road remodel?
Yeah. Through the chair, I'm Kurt Voss, the engineering director. Mr. Starr, the answer is we're going to do everything we can to minimize and avoid any tear-up of any freshly laid down pavement. We're trying to work on the west side of the right-of-way so that we're out of the travel way.
And do you anticipate the project closing the road?
I anticipate there to be at least one lane open at one time through our traffic control measures so that we don't close off the road, so that traffic can move through. But in order to work on the side, we're going to need to cast spoils and so
Well,
forth.
if you can be overly
we'll have at least one lane.
And it's just before we approve it, I just want to be overly sensitive to the fact that these folks lived through road closures almost all of last summer, and if we're going to hit them again in the fall with your projects, they have duly noted to complain at a higher level. So who do we send those concerns to when it's not going quite right?
We will have a project manager. They'll be identified. It'll be on the internet, and there'll be a phone number there, and that'll be the person to go talk to.
Well, I'm happy to see the water system being upgraded in the area for sure, but I'm not sure that our government process has worked appropriately here, and we're going to incur more costs because we couldn't tie it in with the previous project. But just criticism for that, but I appreciate your response and accountability. Thank you.
Duly noted.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say I understand where Mr. Starr is coming from, but I want to thank WWW because you're going to do exactly what he'd like for the Alexander Avenue project with their water line issues and also with 73rd Avenue. So thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Voss. Seeing no one else in queue, please vote. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
And that item passes unanimously. The next item before us is AR 182. This is a resolution basically recommending denial of an alcohol beverage conditional use for a duplicate beverage dispensary use and license number 4157 in the B2A district for Basilio Gallo, also called Rum Runners Old Town Bar and Grill, located at 415 East Street, Anchorage Town Site, Block 43, Lot 6. And it's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 383. If anybody would like to speak to us about Rum Runners.
Madam Chair, if I may, just a brief motion.
Pardon me, state your point, Mr.
May we combine the public hearing on item 14B and item 9 Bravo 4, even though 9 Bravo 4 is not technically a public hearing item?
Well, I was advised by Assembly Counsel specifically not to do that, Mr. Starr, because it's a very separate issue. So, Mr. Starr, I am really having trouble. Mr. Flynn, thank you.
I'm the one with the sport coat.
Thank you.
Ma'am, would you entertain a motion to adjourn so you can get home?
Yes.
Not going to do it, but
Oh, okay. All right. So at this time, if you'd like, please come forward and identify yourself for the record and speak in the microphone.
Thank you, Ms. Chair and Assembly members. Mr. Flynn, nice to meet you. My name is Terry Russi. I am the general manager at the historic Anchorage Hotel. The hotel is located at 330 E Street, which is exactly northwest of Rum Runners. We are a small 26-room hotel, the only hotel in Anchorage on the National Register of Historic Places. We are protesting this additional 200-plus people below the bar that's already there because of the fact the 400 persons in the bar when they come outside in the street is very noisy. The bar itself is a loud nuisance in the neighborhood. There is an Anchorage noise ordinance, and this bar continues to keep the doors open and have their bass continuously play between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. This loud music blasts out through the doors and disturbs our hotel guests who are there as tourists in the downtown area to stay with us. And we've had this month $2,000 worth of cancellations. People check out days early because they don't want to be on the side of the noisy side. Now we're asking people, just let us know what's going on, and when you come back 2 days from now after your trip to Denali, we'll put you on the backside. The hotel staff, I'm in there every morning to take these complaints. It hurts. It really hurts. The conditional use permit for that lower half, I don't know if anybody has seen that lower half. It is in the vault. They opened it up for the ACV members after our banquet, all of us to go down there and to experience the vault. It's crowded, it's tight, it's like, where is the way out of here? And then when it was time that we were leaving, there's, not the clientele you would want in downtown. It looked more like a strip club. And I remember the fact when the Bush Company used to be downtown. I worked for the Sheraton for a number of years. I am suggesting that they need additional security, some kind of additional security, a different entrance into this bar. It's not doing our downtown justice. I mean, our guests are asking us if it's safe to go downtown. It's 11 o'clock at night. Is it safe to go downtown? Because they're scared to death of the bar and all the commotion that goes on out there. And just for records, I would like somebody to know this, that 20 minutes before this meeting started at 5 o'clock, I was called by somebody and suggested that I don't testify. I think that's kind of strange. I think that might be all I have. There is. There's 9 bars in nightclubs. I know that there's 41 liquor permits or whatever the case may be, but there's only 9 bars in our 1,000 feet area, as it states in here, and there's no problem with them. It's the commotion at a bar that can hold 400, and now we're asking for another 200 just on that one corner, and not me, but my owner is the hotel. He's the one who's losing the money. I'm just losing the faith, because on TripAdvisor, we were number 2. Starting June 1st, we were number 2, and we fell to number 7. This afternoon, I heard we were back up to number 5, but still, it's a lot.
Okay. Thank you. We do have questions. Mr. Flynn.
Me?
You were in queue.
I was, that's right. Nice to meet you in person. We conversed a little bit via email. Have you had the opportunity, have you had the opportunity or been approached by anybody from Rum Runners to discuss your concerns?
Yesterday, he came, and my day off, he came and talked to the owner. And the owner has now placed notices in the hotel that if there's any noise disturbances from Rum Runners, we are to call Mike Schomer or to call the manager, and it's posted. And that's what I got to see today. But he had a meeting yesterday with the owner. Last Thursday, he came also at 6 o'clock at night trying to find me. I wasn't there at 6.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Honeman.
That was along the lines of my same question right here. What's the biggest, I guess, the source of your biggest complaint? Is it the loud music because the doors are open, or is it the large crowds gathering in and out of the entryway? Which causes your biggest?
It was at first the loud music because the doors were open and the doors were never closed. But just recently now it's been the motocross bikes and everything, and the crowds of people that are standing outside of the bar. And this all, I should have said that this has all happened because I'm sure you all know the previous owner, Bob Newman, who owns the hotel. He's had the lease. He's got out of it, in 2007, and he leased it out to them for 2 years. On May 28th, that Memorial Weekend, the music went up, and it's been continuously for a year. I wrote letters. Yes, I have spoken to Mr. Mike, the manager over there, owner. I have spoken to him over the years. He has done private caterer permits events for me in my hotel. But no, there's, we'll get it fixed. And then the next day or the next week, it's not being done.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Trainee.
Just I want to know when this had started, and you just told us that. So
As soon as it was signed, May 28th, 2010, because I know we had a wedding party and they were taking pictures of the crowds outside and the music and how, the third floor, we're going to turn the third floor into a nightclub too. So May 28th, 2010. During the winter months, we can control how our guests feel because we put them on the backside, a nice alley view of the trash can. They don't get to see the beautiful Chugach Mountains. They don't get to see anything. We're trying to protect them from looking outside and seeing it.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Buzz Rolfing, Rohlfing, and I own the property just across the street from Run Runners. And I think in the last couple of months we've had about $4,500 worth of damage to our property. People breaking windows, bending antennas, fighting, screaming, and so forth. So I thought that I'd go over to the neighbor and see what I could do to kind of work something out. And I talked to the manager. I said, "What can we do?" And he said, "See that door? When they walk out that door, we have no more responsibility." And I went, "That's a good way to treat your neighbors." So they haven't been doing very well by me, as far as I'm concerned.
Mr. Honeman has a question for you.
Yeah. And I guess the same question you Mr. Flynn had asked earlier from Anchorage Hotel. Have you addressed Mr. Schomer or anyone from Rum Runners?
Well, I went over to the existing manager at the time, and that was a response, so I felt that I did my due diligence, and then I heard about the meeting, so that's when I showed up for this.
Okay.
Mr. Birch?
Yeah, I had a question regarding how long have you been a neighbor to this property? I mean, is this something that's happened new, or has it been a long?
The last couple of years, it's kind of escalated. We've been there for over 10 years, but it's just really ramped up. And now that summer, it's getting more and more obvious. There's a lot of bike contingencies there, and they roll up their bikes and spin out and so forth. So, it seems like once they're outside of the bar, they don't have any control. And if you call the police department, it takes a little while for them to get there. By that time, they're gone, and the officers just can't do anything to help.
Basically, prior to this, you'd never had...
It didn't seem to be this bad, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to testify?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Assembly. It's like deja vu 20 years ago. Here I stand on a liquor matter. Anyway, you have two issues associated with the operation. You've heard about, if I didn't introduce myself, I'm Dan Coffey. And we have two issues that are related here. You've heard from neighbors about what are basically operational issues, which can impact the conditional use application and so forth. And I've dealt, and you've dealt, or our predecessors have dealt with operational issues for many, many, many years on many, many different establishments. I can remember operational issues on Chilkoot Charlie's 25 years ago. I can remember a hotel in Spinar that had operational issues, and I can list these things over and over again. And what I will say is this, is we took the time to develop operational plans and conditions that would be imposed on conditional uses and things that would lead to protests of liquor licenses if certain conduct continued. We have been successful in both addressing the problems that these folks have talked about, as well as keeping viable operational businesses in business here. Now, tonight before you, as you all know, is the conditional use application. And basically you have three choices, two of which are perhaps realistic and one of which will never happen. The first one that will never happen is approval of the conditional use tonight. So let's get that one off the table. The second two are either deny the conditional use and stop anything, which won't, of course, do anything about the operational issues, but it'll stop the conditional use and it'll stop the ability to have additional patrons and so on. And the business will be prevented for a period of 1 year under our code from coming back in front of you on a conditional use application. So that's one solution. Another solution is let's get a plan of operation that addresses the things that are causing problems for the neighbors, the noise, the vandalism, this types of things. And these are all soluble problems, folks. I mean, we've done these kinds of things in other locations more than once, as I said, and we can do them again. And
probably the best forum for doing them is the Public Safety Committee, and bring this matter back to you. To do that and to accomplish that, as well as to give appropriate consideration to the conditional use, we are asking you to postpone action on 2011-182, which is the conditional use resolution, for 60 days, or your second meeting in September, however that works out best, for the opportunity to complete to do what I just suggested, which is get an operational plan that addresses the current problems, noise, vandalism, that sort of thing, and secondly, to see if there are issues associated with the conditional use application, and I'll tell you tonight, there are many, okay, that need to be addressed. But if we're going to make a decision on the conditional use, then it ought to be fully vetted. We ought to know all the facts. We ought to make a solid effort to answer the current operational problems. And then we ought to come back in front of you with an operational plan that is clearly adopted, required, can lead to a protest of a liquor license, can lead to a revocation of a conditional use, and theoretically, and I believe it would work, solve the problems. So, on the resolution in 9B4 for protest, we have no objection. On the other, we ask for a continuance in the range of 60 days.
Thank you. Do you have questions? Mr. Honeman.
Well, Mr. Coffey, thank you for coming out and addressing it. I think you're absolutely right on the first option that being approved tonight is not that I could predict. My crystal ball is fairly clear on that. Secondly, I think you and I share a similar passion, and that is that business should be in business to run it right.
Yep.
It shouldn't be irresponsible. It shouldn't be bad neighbors, period. And in particular, this industry, I think we know there's like 40-some licenses in that downtown area nearby, most of which operate day in and day out without the same problems that you heard tonight from both the Anchorage Hotel and the business directly across the street. So I'm more than interested in hearing from Runners and the management and trying to, again, they're asking to do a duplicate license for the downstairs to add more patrons.
Yes.
And if they're having difficulty with the existing conditional use and the existing, if you will, business operational side, then I believe they need to come prepared with some good operational opportunities to explain. And I look forward to that. So thank you for your bringing this to our attention.
Well, and if I might respond, Madam Chair, the situation of turning down the conditional use tonight doesn't do anything to address the current operational issues, which seem to be of substantial concern to the neighbors, and rightly so. So this will give us an opportunity to address both if we can do this.
I agree. Thank you.
Mr. Birch.
Thanks for coming down, Dan. One question I had, and it relates to kind of the life safety aspects, and it appears that there's, and I'm not familiar with the basement or the downstairs, but it sounds like it's maybe there's limited access. There's been some electrical work done, and there's been some, so I assume that there's a significant congregation of people in an area below grade with limited access. And I guess there's a kind of a life safety concern, and it appears that there has been some work done that hasn't been permitted, that hasn't been reviewed, it hasn't been inspected by the city building department. And I guess I'm just for the immediacy of the situation, is the public, I guess I'm just worried about, people being in that area without in the current situation, and what is happening today to remedy that?
Well, my understanding is this, that the building permits that were not originally obtained before work started, which is a violation of law, have now been issued, that there are building permits, at least in part or in whole. I don't know all of them, but I know that Ms. Walsh and Mr. Weaver are very much aware of what building permits have been issued. On the inspection issues, I know that there have been inspections by fire. I know that HVAC, heating and ventilation, and electrical is also being done. I understand, without having actually seen the permits, that there are permits, and I understand further that as a result of a meeting that occurred yesterday, limitations were suggested by the staff and said basically in this event timeline, which I believe you have in front of you, that there was a meeting and it was a whole host of people, including the operators of the facility, and the Rum Runners was advised to request a postponement of this case for 60 days. That came from the staff, and we concur. Finish the required work before going back to the Assembly. Have the fire sprinkler system, which is all 3 floors, approved and operational by Wednesday. I was told this afternoon that it's going to be inspected tomorrow and should be approved by tomorrow, which is the 13th, and have all drawings in within 30 days. So there has been clearly inappropriate construction. By inappropriate, I mean construction without building permits. But my understanding also is that the operators are working with the departments to get all of the appropriate permits, construction, inspection, and so forth. And I know they have a licensed general contractor working for them.
Okay. Thank you. That is reassuring. On a secondary note, the discussion, or there's testimony that, what goes on outside the door is of no concern to the owner, and obviously it might not relate directly to this permit, but in your long experience in the industry, what responsibility do you feel an operator has to, or culpability, or to basically understand the that that crowd or that those patrons may have on surrounding neighborhoods?
Any operational plan has to reflect, and depends on where it is. For example, in Spenard, where there's parking lots provided by the business, they patrol the parking lots. Downtown parking is a different issue. There's no requirement for the business to provide it, but I was told that they keep their security, quote, posted outside, but your security patrol should go beyond just the corner of your building, maybe across the alley, maybe down the half a block, maybe around the corner. And if those sorts of considerations are imposed in an operational plan, then you're going to address the problem that this gentleman faced, and frankly, which is the responsibility of the business that brings the 400 people or however many it is into the downtown area. They are running a business, hopefully profiting, and as a result, there's impacts across out of their building and across the line, and they can't be responsible in the sense that some lunatic can come down and shoot out a window, but they can certainly be an active presence in the vicinity of their own business. Right. And I would strongly urge that to them as something that needs done.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Starr.
You're obviously representing the petitioner here. The guy that filled out the form is not going to speak as well, so I should direct my questions to you then as what your role is.
That's correct.
Your testimony, of course. What I see on 2011-182, which is the denial portion of it, there's a statement on line 31 through 33 that says, whereas since late May 2011, the police department has not issued any additional catering permits, and the petitioner continues to operate and serve alcohol without a conditional use and licensing or catering permits. Mm-hmm. Means that they exceeded their normal 12 permits for catering opportunities in that premise, mm-hmm. and yet they continue to serve alcohol, even though through the chain of events documentation that you reference in here, we saw not only did they just serve alcohol, they were also told to knock it off, not just because they didn't have permits, but because they were misusing their conditional use for the upper floor. Is that right?
Well,
I asked
what you just, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I ask you because the only way that they can serve alcohol in that facility now is because they're authorized through a conditional use and a beverage dispensary license, and that is prescribed on a single dispensary location.
Here's the rule. Let's be clear. First of all, the rule is you can serve your alcoholic beverages on licensed premises. Premises are defined first by the ABC board because when you get your license, you show them what your premise is. So you have a floor plan, basically. Secondly, premises defined by the conditional use that allows them to occupy and sell alcohol, dispense alcohol in the premises under the conditional use. At the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board, when the duplicate application was filed, a new premises diagram was filed with it, which included the basement. My understanding is it was in part that reason that the catering permits were allowed. And I have a meeting with Joe Hamilton, who is the enforcement officer for the ABC board, who is doing this investigation and who is going to make a report, and we may see ABC board action on this issue later. Today, I obtained the conditional use application permit from 2001 that Mr. Newman filed with you. That application, which was approved by you, contained language to the effect that the downstairs area was not part of the licensed premises. Now, catering permits were issued, 12 of them. Police did it, fire said it was okay, people were allowing the operation from government, but it should never have happened. It should never have happened.
Who had the burden of that, though?
It's always on the licensee. You cannot avoid the responsibility as the licensee. You have to be responsible. Ignorance of the law doesn't work when you're dispensing alcoholic beverages.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean it doesn't happen? Of course it happens, but the question is, you can't duck it by saying, I didn't know.
Well, furthermore, in my district, it's not a threat to my community, but we have the Walmart discussions that I say it, and I've said it several times up here, is that if I have to, because an operator's making actions that aren't conducive to my neighborhood, I'll pursue whether or not the conditional use should stay in force.
Right.
Because I can't necessarily pursue the beverage dispensary license, but without one, they can't do the other. And so I'm concerned now that an operator who's been since 2001, as you say, sort of deliberate here.
No, not since 2001. These folks came in 10. The conditional use application that the clerk was able to give me today was done by the prior owner. These guys did not make this application.
Okay.
Now, their mistake, if that's what it was relying on the premise diagram they filed with the ABC board versus the conditional use permit that was issued in 2001.
Yeah.
That doesn't excuse it, but that's what I think happened.
Well, my questioning basis was sent to that, but it also is to sort of illustrate my irritation that would occur, because it puts me and this body in an awkward light.
Yeah.
Become an enforcement agency, and that's not what I want to be here. I want to be an approval agency. So I've got to think hard on this one, and at this point, I have no questions for you, but if others come up, I'd bring you back up. Thank you.
Mr. Starr, the clerk's informed me she'd like to comment on your question.
I don't need to comment.
You don't need it? Okay.
I'm here to take testimony.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Traney.
Hi, Mr. Coffey. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
In 2001, we gave them a conditional use for rum runners on their first floor,
Yes.
not to include the second floor. Now
Or
with
the basement either.
Huh?
Or the basement.
Or the basement.
Yeah.
Now with the 60 days that they'd like to have, can you guarantee us, or can the owner, they will not serve any alcohol in the downstairs area while the 60 days is going on?
Well, let's put it this way.
I don't want any trader's permit. I don't want them serving a six-pack. They're not authorized.
No. If they were as foolish as that, two things would happen. One, they could go get another lawyer, and number two, you guys would turn them down so fast their head would spin, and you would probably protest or try to revoke the existing conditional use. I can't guarantee behavior, but I can tell you that everything I will advise them is do not, under any circumstances, do anything beyond what is currently permitted, which is the main floor, the first floor.
I remember you and I dealt with one on Spinard and 36th.
Paradise Inn, Mr.
Yes,
Traney.
remember that
Paradise
one?
Inn, yes.
I mean, I'm willing to give them the 60 days. I just want to make sure they clean up their act.
Yeah. Well, as I said, the benefit of it can address both issues. It can address the new conditional use application, and you can turn it down in 60 days, and it's certainly not going to go to them in the interim. But it also allows an opportunity for the Public Safety Committee and the folks who have complaints to come in and say, here's the things you need to do about your current operation, and that can satisfy that situation. Now, I think those of you who have known me for a long time have always understood that I got to solve these problems, because this is a very high-risk business with lots of consequences for not operating it right. And so I'm a real driver to get responsible operators running responsibly. And that's what I would like to do in this case. I've been successful with it before, and I think we could, if we allowed it, we can probably do it again, which will benefit everybody, the current business, the people who are their neighbors, the people who are across the street, and so on. Thank you.
Mr. Honeman.
And I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time. I was going to ask the permitting department, Mr. Weaver, I know you're here. Throughout the document,
Mr. Honeman, would you mind until public testimony is done, and then you could
we could
pull
do
them
that.
up? Would that be all right?
We could do that.
Thank you. It may be done. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on the rum runners? So it does appear that we are done. So public testimony, public hearing's closed. Thank you. Now, Mr. Honeman, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Do we need a motion first?
I'm going to
Oh, okay, thank you.
I'm going to move that we postpone this action until the meeting of September 27th.
All right, the motion is, the item before us is postponement. Mr. Flynn, do you want to speak to that?
I would like to get some questions answered from staff before we vote on that motion,
I
please.
think that would be relevant to deal with the whole matter. So go ahead, sir.
Thank you. And I presume Mr. Weaver and Ms. Walsh are our subject matter experts. I've received a lot of email on this, talked to a few folks on the phone, of course, reviewed the documentation. Could you characterize your relationship with the management of Rum Runners over the past several months?
Madam Chairman, Mr. Flynn, we have been working with the Mr. Schomer and his wife, who's been helping him. Primarily, we've worked with Mr. Schomer. We had a meeting when they submitted their conditional use. We discussed the issues of concern at the time. They made some movement towards compliance. We had a meeting with them yesterday with respect to the fire safety issues and with respect to the building permit issues and lack of work that's taken place in the basement since 2008. We impressed upon them the seriousness of the work that took place in the basement without permits. They've committed to bringing in architectural engineering drawings to come into compliance for all the work that's taken place in the basement. We've given them 30 days to bring in the drawings and obtain the permits and complete the work. They have known our concerns for over 90 days. They understand the significance of our concerns today because they actually passed their fire inspection today. It was scheduled for tomorrow morning, but they had it today, and fire preliminarily has approved it. They have a considerable way to go because we have serious concern about the work that was done in the basement without permits. But they've committed to that schedule, and I believe that they'll move forward to complying with what we've laid out yesterday.
If I may follow up, Madam Chair. Mr. Weaver, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm a parent of a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old, and occasionally the 6-year-old will test me in ways that get me a little bit riled. You might be familiar with this phenomenon. Would you see some parallels between that fate on which I labor and the fate and the nature of your relationship with the management of Rum Runners of late?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Flynn, I just met Mr. Schomer yesterday, so that's really my first involvement with Mr. Schomer and the management. Planning staff has worked with the applicant. Building safety has worked with the applicant. I don't believe that they understood the seriousness of our concerns over the past 90 days, but I do believe they do now, because it's such a serious issue that it really puts the whole first and second floor in perspective if they don't come into compliance with the basement.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. May I just make a few comments, Madam Chair?
Sure, you have the floor.
I am really struggling with this one. It's tough from the written word to discern people's intent. You may recall, we brought forth a resolution of non-objection to the conditional use and ultimately did not present it because we decided that rewarding bad behavior, even if it wasn't malicious, is not the standard we want to set in this body. And while I appreciate Mr. Coffey's point that continuing the conditional use permit amendment process allows us to address the existing concerns, I'm having a hard time understanding why those existing concerns have been essentially ignored for months, if not longer. So, in the same vein that we did not bring forward the conditional non-objection, I am disinclined to support an extension of this permit, conditional use permit process, and instead would encourage a no vote on that and a yes vote on AR 2011-182.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman, you're next.
I think most of the questions I asked from Mr. Weaver are in the conditional use. It appears there's some, and I'm not sure. It's tough to find out which direction, which year of which conditional permit we had in here. But it appears that there's several entries from permitting that says certain conditions have been met, but in fact those conditions have not. Is that correct? For instance, the fire inspection up until today, or the electrical inspection, things of that nature.
Madam Chair, Mr. Holman, it's somewhat difficult to follow the process when you have multiple actions taking place in a structure with permits and different disciplines, but there was considerable confusion with this property.
Okay. I think that's sufficient at this time to answer. I thought it was maybe perhaps just me trying to interpret it. Thank you.
Mr. Traney?
Madam Chair, at this issue, I may have a conflict on this. I just need to bring it forward.
I'm sorry. I forgot to bring that out. I apologize to Mr. Traney.
At least we did it before we voted.
Indeed. You want to
As you
state
know,
your...
I have a relatively large family. Not a lot. A relatively large family. One of my sons works for the same firm that Mr. Carthy owns.
Mr. Traney, do you have an immediate financial...
He doesn't live with me, doesn't support me. Other than he says he knows how to commit me. But I don't know what that means. But nonetheless.
Mr. Traney, if your son tells you to vote a certain way, do you vote the way he tells you?
I never have yet.
All right. I'm going to rule that you do not have a conflict and you should participate in this discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Starr.
I'm challenged by this as well in that my feeling, although I've never been in Rum Runners, is that as a liquor purveyor of a pretty high and significant clientele, they sort of carry a higher burden. This isn't the sort of the city bar that 20 people go to and hang out. It affects not only the patrons at the bar, but it affects, as we've heard, the property owners surrounding that. And I don't find that whether it be any sort of form, granted it's dispensing alcohol, there's always that undertone, but if this was a used car dealer or a repair center or other use request for the neighborhood, I would probably judge it by the same merits. And my challenge is that the burden of proof on their ability to grow their business in this level hasn't been proven to me yet. And I use the word burden now two ways, and one of them is going to be confusing. I think the burden of proof is reliant on the applicant to tell us that they can do this appropriately. That's what property ownership comes with, is the responsibility to say, I can operate my business as designed on my property in an effective manner. And I'm not pushed into that area yet that this petitioner, through the application that we have in front of us, has done that. Now, I use the word burden another way, is that now with the 60-day burden, we're going to ask, looks like the Public Safety Committee, to get involved with the mitigation of a solution to help this property owner operate his business. And we're going to sort of shift that burden to a partnership agreement between that operator and, in our case, government. And I'm challenged by needing to do that. So I'm not really sure how that goes. I am all for giving the benefit of the doubt. If this was a startup business and they were ill-advised or they had sort of found their way through here, great. But there's been Mr. Weaver's interaction, a lot of guidance, a lot of notations, the discussion therein that they perhaps didn't know but know now, and weird statements. That this one really challenges me because it demonstrates our ability to be flexible, I think, beyond what's appropriate. And in this case, I'm not convinced that that's it. So those are my comments. I would just like some clarity on it. What the postponement is, Mr. Honeman, Your motion on the floor is to postpone what I see as 182. We combined the public hearings, but your motion is specific to what?
We were advised not to combine.
Oh, I understand. Okay, now I'm clear.
182, and it's strictly till the September 27th.
Thank you.
You bet.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules, if I might.
Could you weigh in?
What purpose?
Click on. I'm going to second that. I specifically requested him to do this. The reason is we got advice from our attorney before this started that we should look at potentially pulling a section of this ordinance that deals with the planning staff analysis that was mentioned earlier. We should pull that out because subsequent information has come up that makes that document moot. So basically, no matter what we do with this, the advice from Ms. Tucker is to get rid of that section. And since I didn't expect the first motion to be the postponement, I expect the first motion to be approval. So I didn't call on Mr. Hall first thing. So I'm I guess, asking if you would object to would you approve the motion to suspend the rules to allow that? Mr. Trainee.
What section, Madam Chair, are we talking about? Can you tell us what page?
Mr. Hall?
It's page 2 of 14B. It's the Planning Division Staff Analysis Conditional Use.
And if I could, Ms. Tucker, would you like to amplify the rationale?
Thank you. Yes, I would, through the chair. My advice of council to the Assembly is to request the Planning Department to withdraw that. My understanding from reading the documents is that the mayor's AM, which is attached to this packet, states on its face that since the Planning Department staff analysis was prepared, new facts have come to light. And so it is confusing. It was confusing to me since the staff analysis was dated today. I believe it was probably prepared in advance of today for today's Assembly meeting, but it, throughout the staff analysis, states that the conditions for the conditional use permit have been met, and I believe that that is not the administration's position at this time, and I believe that keeping that in the record would be an admission, in fact, that they were met. And so I had talked to Mr. Weaver and had sent an email to Mr. Wheeler suggesting that the department withdraw their report if, in fact, my analysis was correct, that it was no longer their current position.
I also discussed this with Mr. Weaver before the meeting started, and he concurred. He had no problem with pulling it. So,
No objection.
Mr. Weaver, would you want to comment on that?
Madam Chairman, we would need to rewrite the staff report for your next meeting anyway, so.
Okay, so basically, is there an objection to postponing suspending the rules? My tongue is not working clearly today. To suspending the rules to deal with this. Is there any objection to that? Hearing none. Then, Mr. Tromley, are you all right with that?
Oh, I'm doing great.
We appreciate that, Mr. Tromley. All right, then. Now that we have suspended the rules, I'm going to then allow Mr. Hall to conform to the Planning Department request to withdraw that section. Is that a correct statement of your motion, Mr. Hall?
That's the correct statement of my motion.
Second.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. It's section?
It's page 284 of the packet.
So when this comes back, that will be different. 284 to what, Mr. Hall?
284 through 292.
All right. Is there objection to that from anybody? Go ahead, Miss, my screen just completely blanked out, so I
Madam
don't.
Chair, yeah.
Go ahead,
The
Ms.
Planning
Drummond.
Department's report appears to contain the map on page 293. That is numbered the same as the Planning Division Staff Analysis 2011-076. I think this actually, the Planning Department's report, I could use some help from the planning staff here, goes through at least page 298 of our notebook, through the list of licenses.
Ms. Drummond, based on Mr. Weaver's comment that he's just going to rewrite this section if it passes.
It's just a written document.
I don't know. Did you have a question, an objection to that?
Well, if we're going to withdraw the Planning Department's report, we should withdraw the Planning Department's report, not just part of it.
Ms. Tucker?
Through the chair, the staff analysis, as I see it in the report, if you look at page of the book, page 292, at the very top, you'll see that that's page 9 of 9 of the report. So it would be the first page of the report, as I see it, is 284, and the last page of the report, as I see it, is 292. And those would be the 9 pages of the staff analysis report.
Anything further, Ms. Drummond?
No.
Is there objection then to withdrawal of the staff report? There appears to be no objection. All right. We are back then to the motion to, can't hear me. I'm sorry, my computer just left.
Here, take.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Is there anything further on the motion to postpone? Mr. Honeman.
Madam Chair, and just in the fact that, right, and it just appears that there's just so much confusion and obviously some errors, even by the municipal professional staff. And to not to point fingers or pick, I really do believe Mr. Coffey's correct on this one here. It does no harm if we can, within the 60 days, and I do intend to schedule this for the next Public Safety Committee meeting, and that gives ample time for us to sit down, cool heads, prevail, to look through this whole matter. And I know I've been accused oftentimes, and particularly I see Ms. Villamides from Anchorage Char, and several people actually point fingers at me and think that I'm actually anti-alcohol industry. So that's actually not true. But I am deaf on making sure people are doing things accurately, and they're doing it correctly, and they're being responsible. And I believe we can all benefit by taking a few moments, pause on this, and just approve the 60-day request. Come back before us on September 27th, and I think we'll have better information. And we can vote this thing up or down based on what we learn from between now and then. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I see the queue again. Mr. Hall?
Madam Chair, you see the queue, but I believe it's out of sequence.
I'm in it.
Thank you. I think I'm in it. I've got no problem giving them 60 days. Let's see what they can do to correct their past mistakes. 60 days is not the end of the world. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Mr. Honeman, you already spoke. You're okay.
Oh.
Mr. Starr.
Well, it appears from the action plan, if we can call it that there's some things that they're going to do, which is relating in an overlap way, as Mr. Weaver drifted towards. There's areas that seem to be not appropriately managed, whether or not there was a duplicate dispensary license or not. So, we have a task at hand here to do several things, and so by opening the dialogue to have a duplicate license and a additional conditional use put forth and expanded, that now we've raised question therein. So I want to be clear that the operational plan and the action plan specifies how we're going to address those folks that are sitting behind you and some of their stuff, neighborhood relations and all the things that go with crowd management. But on the other hand, the application to me needs to be accurate as well. They're asking for an expansion of 770 feet, and they want to put 209 people in that. So I don't know that we've got all of that accuracy there as well. So by delaying the packet, I will bring up other things. Can you put 209 people in 770 feet? So there's all of those issues that do that. And it's in your own application, so look at me with question, but that's what I see. When I sit down on Friday afternoon, review my packet, it says 770 square feet, you're going to put 209 more people in that area. That's just logic. I mean, that's not appropriate. So I don't ask for comment. I'm just saying that by then I'll raise another question. I can raise that question today as much as I can raise it in September 29th. So I'm giving you statements that I would also raise in 60 days. And so address them, the process of how that police summary and why 18 permits for catering were requested when 12 is the law. You know, we have to go back and follow our own rules if this industry would like to have that happen. So not only do we have crowd control management as additional conditional use permits, but I'll be really interested to see how hard our staff now has to work to prove up. And that's their time, our committee work and all the other things. That's to me not appropriate, and we should charge for those services if I had the druthers. But okay, I'll go with the extension and delay, Mr. Honeman, if you're willing to take on the burden of proof. Thank you.
All right. My computer just shut down again, so if anybody else wants to speak, there appears to be no one. Please, can you set up the vote? Please vote on the motion to give an additional.
Hey, why don't you try a voice vote?
I think, okay, we can do a voice vote.
It's not working.
Do you need me up? Okay. Harriet?
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
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 No.
No. Yes.
That,
He said yes.
so I counted 3 noes. There were 3 noes.
Patrick was a no vote.
Mr. Flynn, you were a no vote, weren't you?
That is correct.
All right. That motion to give the additional 60 days passed 8-3. We are now at.
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of item 9, Bravo 4, the S version.
We need a public hearing on that, sir.
No, we don't.
No.
Oh,
That was
it's right.
part of the consent agenda.
You're correct, sir.
Second.
That matter is before you. If you could raise your hand if you want to speak. Mr. Honeman?
Well, I believe it's appropriate that we stand in protest to the ABC board until these matters are concerned. There's conditions in the resolution that addresses once the matters are cleared. If there's done, then there'll be no protest. So I believe we should vote.
I'm sorry, which version was moved?
I move the S version.
That's what I thought you said.
The S version.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
I just have a clarity on this.
Go
This
ahead.
brings the conditional use back to us, though, upon completion. Is that what I understand? So in other areas, our protest just carries till compliance. The clerk's office proves up, but in this case, the petition will come back to us. We'll see the conditional use again.
Ms. Tucker?
Can somebody tell me that?
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Starr, you will see the conditional use again anyway. You've just made the vote to see the conditional use in September. The protest will follow the conditional use. You will see this protest again. It is the purpose of redrafting the S version is to make sure that it comes back to the Assembly and is not delegated to the clerk's office.
I'm clear. Thank you.
At the chair's request. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Starr was the only one in queue, so at this time, please vote on the S version. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Mr. Birch? The S version passed unanimously. Thank you. The next item.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move to change the order of the day. Take up 14D.
Second.
Procedural matter, quite a bit easier than what we've heard. Should have no testimony. Staff in the office or in the audience waiting. So we could see that. No objection to changing that 14D.
Is there any objection to changing the order of the day to deal with 14D? There appear to be no objections. This time, I'd like to open the public hearing on AO 76. This is an ordinance authorizing the long-term lease between the municipality of Anchorage as a leaseor and Aero Twin Incorporated as a leasee of Lot 2, Block 4, Merrillfield replat, located between runway 07-25 and Merrillfield Drive. Anybody who'd like to speak to this matter, please come forward. This is D. Hearing and seeing no one, the public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Trombley, this is 14D. How do you vote?
Did you say 14D?
D is in Delta, sir.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Oh. And that item passes unanimously. We're now at 14C on the agenda. This is AO 70. This is an ordinance adopting the Beach Lake Regional Master Plan update as an element of the comprehensive plan and amending Anchorage Municipal Code Section 2105030 and AO 2006-172 Attachment A to revise provisionally adopted Anchorage Municipal Code Section 21.01.080 Eagle River Chugiak Parks and Rec, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum. If you'd like to speak on the Beach Lake plan, please come forward. And state your name and spell it, please.
Name and spelling? My name is Jill Philanders Crosby, F-L-A-N-D-E-R-S space, no hyphen, Crosby, C-R-O-S-B-Y, and I am speaking on the behalf of the Birchwood Community Council this evening. Basically, what I'm going to do right now, there are actually several members here who are in support of the master plan as it is written, and rather than testimony after testimony after testimony, unless they want to add something further or you want to hear from them, they are going to stand up, please, to show their support. Thank you. I do not know what you have in front of you. I do not know if you have a staff report or if you have a copy of the master plan. But this master plan was very well vetted by the community. There was a citizens advisory group that met multiple times over the course of several months. We received multiple feedback from many community members. We talked over a lot of issues. Not every issue was everybody's, individual issue was able to be met, but we came to a great deal of compromise. So we feel that this is a very solid plan. We ask you to remember that this park is the only park in the Birchwood Community Council area. It is the premier site and probably arguably has the best dog trails, I would say, in the state, let alone in the Anchorage Bowl. It is a premier site for cross-country skiing. I would say about 50% of this is wetlands, so although you may think, oh, this park is really huge, we need to do more with it, there are a great deal of wetlands that would prevent such a thing from happening. The one issue that we do want to raise, and this specifically also comes from Birchwood Community Council, is the issue of the 10 acres in the northwest quarter of Section 25 that was removed from Section 25 when this parkland was dedicated during the Begich administration. It has always been the community's desire that the entire Section 25 be a part of the park, and we have been talking about this easily 20 years. Why these 10 acres were taken away at that time, we don't know. We understand it was for school site selection, possible school site selection. It was promised to us, albeit verbally, by the former administration that if ASD did not select this property, it would be turned back over to the park. When the master plan for Beach Lake Park began, it was asked specifically of John Rada to address these 10 acres. The CAG, I have 5 minutes, right? Birchwood Community Council?
Typically, we just give 3, but go ahead and conclude if you
Okay. Be turned back over. John Rada assured us over and over that he had spoken to multiple people, that it was going to be turned back over. Eklutna said they didn't want it. ASD did not select it. We were told if they did not select it, it would be turned back over to us. At the Planning and Zoning meeting, it was all of a sudden pulled back out. And so we want to request that it is possible for the Assembly to make an ordinance amending AO 2006-182S when this land was first turned over as a school site. There's a section that says, whereas a 10-acre portion in the southwest quarter, section 25, may be used for a school site, yada, yada, yada. We ask that perhaps there be an ordinance introduced that this 10 acres is given back to the park. It is the gem of Section 25. It is the anchor of Section 25. We move forward on the plan with the understanding from John Rada that there was no problem. It was going to be coming back over to the parkland. So at that, I will stop unless you have certain questions.
I want to make sure she got everything she wanted to say out, Madam Chair.
Pardon? More or less, yeah. I would have put about another minute in there. So.
Thank you.
Well, in that other minute, then I just want to say that Birchwood Community Council, when the ASD selected the alternate site for the Powder Ridge school site, we did not give too many problems with it because we had the good faith that they were going to be releasing this other site into the park. And so in good faith, I would just love to see this be reconsidered. We, as I said, built the northwest quarter part of the park of Section 25 around the fact that this was the anchor. This was the wood site. This is a very, very beautiful site with perhaps century-old trees and beautiful views that belong to the community. It was meant to be the dark skies. Leave it alone as it is, forest trails, especially given the fact that the lower part of Section 25 still has the gravel pit issue hanging over it, and that gravel could be extracted.
Mr. Birch has a question.
Yes, sir.
Just in scanning, I had a call from someone that was commenting regarding the potential conflict between the sled dog trails and the ski trails and access to the inlet. Is that all pretty well mapped out and kind of worked through? You don't have to have a separated grade. I mean, maybe that'd be optimal.
I would actually rather let the head of the Birchwood or the Beach Lake Mushing Trail speak to that. That was an issue that came up. For safety reasons, safety reasons, there needs to be a separated grade trail between the dog trails and a year-round access trail out to Beach Lake. And it's not that this can never be done, but it needs to be done correctly at the very beginning, which requires a lot of money. So if you do not do the separated trails right there, and I may be misspeaking a little bit, and I can let Val speak to that, then you create worse problems that cost more to fix and create safety problems for dog mushers and pedestrians and loose dogs.
Don't stop signs work?
No, they don't, actually. So, but I will let Val speak to that in particular. Okay?
Mr. Honeman.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you and all. Apparently, this was a very involved public process, and replacing a plan that's been around since 1973, I think.
Yes, sir.
It's pretty noted to me. And I didn't know, maybe I should know this, I done some research myself. 1,750 acres, is that what's this park is? Is that the largest park in the municipal inventory?
In the municipal what?
Municipal inventory, largest park?
I don't think so.
I don't believe so, but we could ask Mr. Rada.
I'm just curious. No? Okay. Well, it's pretty astounding, a large piece of property and a lot of input from the public. It is very important that people who are not only the community residents, but the people that super users, particularly the dog trails and folks in that area that need to actually have the input. Sounds like it was well done and well.
It was.
And thank you.
It was.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to testify on this matter?
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the Assembly, my name is Bobby Wells, W-E-L-L-S, or M-U-D, depending who you are. I asked Professor Crosby, who's our Vice Chair, to testify for me. I seem to be a little short of wind nowadays, which might account for the other name. 39 years ago, I waited for this day. I've waited 39 years for this day. I commend Land Design North with the assistance of Agnew Beck in thoroughly vetting this whole thing with the public. Everybody got a say, including the gentleman you referred to, Mr. Birch. His idea wasn't feasible. As a matter of fact, all of my ideas weren't feasible. But we came to a compromise, and we have a very, very good plan. We like what we produced. We need your approval now, so it will become the official plan, the guiding document for now and in the future. I'm sure you haven't read this, but I would encourage you, after you approve this, to go ahead and read it, because it's very detailed. You can't misunderstand what we're saying. Chairman Honman, the acreage is impressive. Just don't forget 50% of that is composed of wetlands. We cross-country ski and dog mush. We have always done that, and we continued to build on that. The plan itself emphasizes quiet and passive recreation. Those are our skiers, our cross-country skiers, the mushers, walking, hiking, horseback riding, and fishing. There are no organized sports with their high development and maintenance costs here, nor will there be use of any mechanized or motorized vehicles, which in a way is ironic because a good percentage of the existing trails are historic and were created by the military on snow machines and other tracked vehicles. Jill addressed our northwest quarter. That area has minimal development. It will remain as a sanctuary for the wildlife and waterfowl that are so abundant there. The footprint of man will be minimal based on the underlying gravel extraction issue, which hopefully one day, one way or another, will be resolved. Life is stressful. This park, this northwest quarter, which is the addition to this park, is a stress reliever. I encourage you to all come out and visit us. The only clouds on the horizon is that 10-acre parcel, which is still held hostage by this administration and HLB. Clear that up, then we have the underlying gravel rights. And so I would ask that you please approve this plan now. I've waited 39 years for it, and thank you very much.
Mr. Honeman has a question.
Ms. Wells, thank you for testifying. I know it seems like you struggled a little bit to get through it, but you did quite well. Do you think this plan will last 39 more years in case we have to come back and revisit it at some other point?
Well, I'll leave that up to you, sir. I think I'll be gone by then.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
I hope it will. It's a guideline. That's what it is, what we can put in there and what we can't. That doesn't mean that we can't have, it does mean we can't have a stop sign, Mr. Birch, but it does mean that maybe Mr. Gibson will get his trail over the Mushers Trail. They'll both be there, but we have to make it safe. We don't want to hurt anyone. We haven't done that so far, and we don't want to start now.
Thank you, Ms. Wells.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, members of the Assembly, my name is Tim Potter with Dow HKM, representing Eklutna Inc. tonight. On the issue of the 10 acres in the southeast corner of Section 25, it's my recollection that that area was held out so that it could be used as part of a school land trade. When Eklutna Incorporated started its master planning effort for Tract 40A, which is about 500 acres, to the south of Section 25, the school district already had an identified school site in the previous master plan for that property. It was poor soils, poor drainage, all kinds of things. Eklutna worked with the community to look at the potential of having a school site selected inside of their 500 acres. That would be a better, more developable piece of property. And in trade, then Eklutna would end up with that 10-acre triangle at the southeast corner of Section 25 because it was at the same elevation of their proposed development. Now that the school site has been selected further to the south, directly off of Terrace Lane, it would be most appropriate, and it's Eklutna Inc.'s desire, that that 10 acres be added to the park, designated as park, and not held out through Heritage Land Bank or the Anchorage School District for development of anything but park use. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Assembly. My name is Janet Brand. It's B-R-A-N-D. I'd like to make a correction. It's been closer to 30 years we've been working towards this because I didn't have children when I first started this process. And I didn't have any gray hair either and was a newlywed. But I am so very, very happy to be here tonight to encourage the passage of the Beach Lake Master Plan. The inclusion of Section 25 is the only disappointment in that we have been working so hard as a community to get this as dedicated parkland. It has been promised to us that if the school district did not use it, it would be dedicated parkland, not just designated for park management, but dedicated parkland. So I'd like to encourage you to amend the original ordinance that dedicates Section 25 to Beach Lake Park to include this 10 acres. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Michael Suprenant, S-U-P-R-E-N-A-N-T, and I'm one of the few Iditarod mushers that actually lives in the municipality of Anchorage. And I'd just like to come out with my strong support for the pass of this Beach Lake Master Plan as it's written, and my strong support for the mushing trails here in town.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Jeff Brand, B-R-A-N-D, and I strongly urge you to do approve the master plan, and because I have to live with her. I've lived with her for 29 years up here, and so please approve the master plan. But even that, the Section 25, the 10 acres, to include it in the parcel would be great. It would add everything to the park. To Mr. Birch's thing, there's no skiing where the dog trails are. Okay, and yes, half of the dog trails is wetlands. Try riding a mountain bike down this dog trails like I have this summer. It's all wetlands. There would need to be a separated grading because dogs don't stop and skiers don't stop and walkers don't stop. But I think I've been to every one of those meetings on Section 25, and just as I said, everybody wants that 10 acres to be part of the park. It's not going to be probably developed. It couldn't be developed for skiing because the hill coming down from it is way too steep for any skier to come down, but it is a beautiful view and it adds to the trails.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Hello, my name is June Takagi, last name T-A-K-A-G-I, and I would like you to support the passing of this. I'm here representing the junior mushers and the junior Nordic skiers. I'm a parent of 2 junior mushers and 2 junior Nordic skiers, and my children have trained on these trails, the dog trails, and both of them have completed 3 junior Iditarods between them. And also my 2 skiers, the same kids, ski those trails. And I would like for other parents to have the opportunity for their children to have these trails for the wonderful opportunity that only Alaska offers to our kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
I'm Val Jokala, the current president of the Chugiak Dog Mushers, and boy, thanks, Jill. Here I am up front testifying, first of all, in support of this plan. I participated on the Citizens Advisory Group, and I found the process to be absolutely collaborative, cooperative among all the stakeholders, and everybody compromised. Did every stakeholder get exactly what they wanted? No, but I think this plan is absolutely excellent. And by the way, if you look in the plan, we do address in later phases putting in kind of an ADA trail on the west side of Beach Lake. So that comes a little bit later, so we hope we have funding and that it is put in properly and safely to keep walkers and hikers and dog mushers separate. So we encourage you from the Chugiak Dog Mushers as one of the stakeholders to please support the plan and vote for it.
Just a second, Val. Mr. Honeman has a question.
Hi, Val. Thanks again for coming out and being part of the board here. And I know I've used one of your sleds, been out to your property, and I know you're taking me down memory lane about how the dogs used to come out of the subdivision and actually mush all the way down to the trails and such. Not as much possibility, a lot more vehicle traffic these days, right?
That's absolutely true. Yep. That was about 10 years ago.
You're actually an Iditarod musher yourself, right?
Yeah, I gave that a shot in '93. Didn't get to finish, but yep, I've been on these trails personally since 1986, and it allows me to live close to in Anchorage. I work in Anchorage. Allows me to live in Chugiak and be able to come to work every day and still lead a dog mushing lifestyle. It's a privilege.
Well, thanks for being a part of this committee to help rewrite the comprehensive plan. It's very valuable input from you. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Hearing and seeing no one else, public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Second.
Is there discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Starr.
Well, oftentimes Debbie and I speak about community identity and unique characteristics, and this is one. Not only the park itself in the 1,750 acres that's now got an action plan, but in what you see out there, which is our unique identity in our ability to come together and speak passionately about what's important to us, and then also how they communicate that to our body. And I'm overly impressed with that and humbled to serve this group of folks that does that. And I listen to them because they tell me what to do. And I think that's the core thing that we need to respect, is that we're being asked to approve it. And it is a great plan. It's colorful. It's wonderful. I'm not going to pontificate, but there's two critical parts on it that I've guided the community on, and I've responded back to that. And that's page 39 of the plan, which, and I mentioned two, I'll speak to one of them. 39 is the funding plan. They term it as a loose capital improvement plan, but we can't lose sight on how we're going to pay for some of these improvements and move forward. And as you've heard me talk about before, we have a mechanism in place that we tax ourselves extra, both for our capital as well as our mill rate, to support the operation and maintenance of facilities such as this. It is a regional park, however. It's our Kincaid version, if you will, of what we have out there. So we look to the municipality as a whole to take ownership of the park and do that. But I'm overly impressed with that. You saw good stewardship, good process in the public, and then for those that don't have the color version, there's probably every user group there shy of the snowmobile clubs, which have weighed in as well. So it shows that, and you didn't hear Friction speak tonight. Generally, it was a group that came together and said we can share these resources appropriately. And Mr. Begich is not here as mayor anymore. However, though, I staunchly will defend it when it's treaded upon. And I'll talk, Deputy Chief Smith can attest to this, when there was a selection item where we were going to put a shooting park on our major asset. And I will stand up loud and clear when we make choices of our holdings like that. And so not only can we take credit when we approve such glamorous plans like this, but you can expect friction when we don't follow through with that. It will take a visit with the mayor to probably have a discussion about the 10 acres remaining and historically bring everybody to bear. I'd be very happy to take back the stack of documentation to Ms. Wells that's about that thick on Section 25. The second thing I referenced again, which is in the very last page, which references the DOT and the gravel extraction rights that they maintain out there, and we can't lose sight of that as well. Perhaps we can bargain that away, buy it back, or perhaps once and for all get that off the table. So that's a pledge to you, Mr. Mayor, to remember about that. As your tenure with Anna Fairclough, you're probably well versed on the gravel extraction dilemma that presents this plan. So enough of that, but we're proud of it, and I hope that we can approve it unanimously with pride, because this is a very good work product brought to you by the community. Thank you.
Mr. Hall?
Yes, I actually have an amendment to make to the ordinance, and that would be in regards to the effective date, and I would like to move that we make that effective date, the date of passage, July 12th, 2011.
Second.
Could you hit the screen for the... Is there objection to adding the effective date of this date? Mr. Trombley, you all right with that?
Yes, I'm fine.
All right. That is incorporated in. Is there any further discussion on the plan? Seeing no further discussion, please vote. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Ms. Gray-Jackson? That passes unanimously. Congratulations and thank you, everybody. The next item before us is 14E. This is AO 75, an ordinance of the Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code Section 1535-105 to provide for limited waiver authority, accompanied by AM 368. This is in relation to wood boilers. Anyone like to testify on this matter, please come forward.
It's one of mine.
Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move approval. Second, whatever you want.
All right. Mr. Trainee, you want to speak to it?
This is a result of an ombudsman's complaint that was filed. It's pretty self-explanatory, and this just takes care of the ability to give the gentleman a waiver for a boiler that he had bought in the interim when it was approved at the time, but later, subsequently, he couldn't hook it up. I think he spent about $16,000 on the boiler. And this just gives him the ability to get a waiver to hook the boiler up.
All right. Seeing no one else in queue, please vote. Mr. Trombley on 14E?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. That passes unanimously. We're now at 14F on our agenda. This is AR 181. It's a resolution authorizing an amount not to exceed $6,300,000.
Waive reading.
Well, I think I need to read that it's basically for the purchase and implementation of the new financial human resources purchasing, budgeting, and payroll enterprise resource planning tool. Anybody who'd like to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Second.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
That item passes unanimously. We are now at 14G on our agenda. This is a AR 184. It's a resolution appropriating when tendered State of Alaska grants in SB 46, and accompanied by an S version and a memorandum. Anybody who'd like to speak to this matter, please come forward. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move the S version.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Trainee.
It's about $4 million shy of what it should be. I'll let it go at that.
I thought you might bring that up, Mr. Trainee.
Well, as time will prove, it was a big mistake, but I'll deal with that later. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Please vote on 14G. Excuse me. Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Ms. Drummond? That matter passes unanimously. We're now at audience participation. If there's anyone in the room who'd like to address us on any matter, please feel free. Hearing and seeing no one, we are at Assembly comments. Mr. Birch, you have any comments?
I do not. Thank
Going
you.
on down? No. Mr. Starr?
No.
No. Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick comments. Mr. Trainey's last comment concerning the $4 million, ditto. But I'd also like to take this opportunity to publicly thank my colleagues, the administration, and my constituents and the governor for not vetoing Alexander Avenue money. They're so excited. There were tears last week on Alexander Avenue. So thank you very much to everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman?
Yes, I missed the Bear Paw Festival's parade, and I'll tell you why. I was at a park fix-up in my district at Little Dipper Park on 32nd, and I absolutely had a great time. I worked a lot. I was there from the beginning, and I actually helped load up the last of the tools for the Parks Foundation and the Municipal Parks Department. So, Mr. Rada, to your staff, to everyone, did a wonderful job. Also, just a reminder, William B. Lyons Park in Mountain View is this coming Saturday the 16th, and the last event is at Sand Lake Park on July 23rd, 9 to noon. So if you guys get a chance, get out there. It's especially if it's a sunny day, it's worth the activity. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Trainey?
Madam Chair, I asked Dennis a few minutes ago to try and get with the EPA to see what the status is on getting rid of the IM program. That albatross is still around our neck. It needs to be done away with. I have a car I was changing into a historic car. It's 30 years old. Anyway, I found it interesting. I had to run from DMV to the IM people at 9th and get an $18 waiver so I could waive the IM requirements for it and then run back and pay the $10 to register it. I wouldn't have had to do that had we gotten rid of the IM program. And I think the feds are dragging their feet. So I want Dennis to let us know, if he would please, what the heck the feds are doing. Because that program needs to be done away with.
And I'm seeing nods from them, sir. So,
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Drummond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, will be at the Sand Lake Park cleanup on July 23rd, but there's another one that not too many people know about on July 16th. That's this Saturday. The Campbell Creek Estuary will have a cleanup, and I believe you enter off Edinburgh Drive and Selkirk, and just show up and check out the newest addition to our public lands. Thank you.
Thank you. A motion to adjourn would be in order.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned.